be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
The PM faces another big U-turn as Tory rebels warn of a backlash against her benefits cuts plan.
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock on Monday, the 10th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Paul Hawkins. Here is what is making the news this Monday morning.
Cabinet ministers have urged Conservative MPs to reunite after another week of infighting. Dozens of backbenchers warn they'll rebel against benefits rising in line with earnings rather than September's inflation figures.
President Putin has called Saturday's attack on Crimea's Kerch Bridge an act of terrorism. It comes as 13 people were killed yesterday by Russian missile strikes in the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia.
It's World Mental Health Day today, with 1 in 4 of us reportedly struggling every year. So as the government prepares to announce a £122 million support package for workers, we'll discover the best ways to try and help improve our mental well-being.
And a slimmed-down ceremony for a slimmed-down monarchy. We'll have more details about King Charles' coronation expected to take place next summer.
And as always, we love to hear from you throughout the programme. Be part of the conversation. We are the People's Channel. Send us your views at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
So our top story at 6:01, Cabinet Ministers Suella Braverman, Penny Mordaunt, pleading for the Conservative Party to show loyalty to the PM.
Yes, it comes as another big U-turn is reportedly on the cards this morning, with several Tory MPs warning the government that they would lose a vote on a real-term cut to benefits.
Well, joining us now for all the latest analysis is the Deputy Digital Political Editor of the Daily Express, Dan Falvey. Very good morning to you, Dan. First of all, do you expect a U-turn?
I don't think she has a choice. Simply, she could not win a vote in the House of Commons on this right now. There's so much anger on the back benches of the Conservative Party. if she chooses to plough ahead without a U-turn, she will lose that vote. Conservative MPs are looking at the polls, and what they're seeing is that their own seats are now at risk at the next election. So right now, it's each man for themselves. They're looking at it and going, I need to prove to my constituents that I've backed them. So they won't care about what they're being told to do, whether being told to back that benefits cut. They will just do what they think is in their interest to win the next election for themselves. So she has no choice, really.
Interesting calls for unity from people who've perhaps not shown that much unity themselves, particularly over the conference period. We had Penny Mordaunt in an article yesterday calling for it. Well, she was the first one to come out and say she thought benefits should increase in line with inflation. We had Suella Braverman, who was critical of the Prime Minister's U-turn and calling some of her peers, accused them of conducting a coup, which is, not exactly unifying language. So, what weight does that carry when people like that are calling for unity?
Well, I think the thing is, we've been here before. We saw under Theresa May the Conservative Party start to fall apart and turn to this infighting. We saw the same under Boris Johnson at the end. I think these senior MPs are looking at the fact that Liz Truss has been in office for less than 4 weeks and we're already at this point. And they're aware that there's another 2 years until the next election, potentially. And they see the writing is on the wall. They need to unite if they're going to have any chance of winning the next election. There is no choice, even if they have real differences of opinion.
Yeah. What are you hearing from Conservative MPs about the polls? Because I imagine they keep looking at the polls and getting even more nervous.
Yeah, exactly, that's it. It's nerves. There are some times we see polls that come out and Conservative MPs can go, you know what, that's not what I'm hearing from my constituents. I'm willing to ignore that one and assume that that's a one-off. That's not how they feel now. They're looking at these polls and it fits the mood music from what they're being told by their constituents. They're very worried about this next election.
Yeah.
What are you hearing about the Grant Shapps spreadsheet, the latest one, where he's having conversations with Conservative MPs who are said to have lost faith in Liz Truss? 237 at the latest count. He obviously last week saying 10 days for her to turn things around, or she might as well roll the dice and elect a new leader. I mean, is that a serious option?
I think most people realise that the idea of ditching a leader within 10 days is just for the birds, quite frankly. To do it so soon would be electoral suicide. Things may look bad come the next election currently, but to suddenly go for a new leader again, what does that mean? Does that mean another leadership election? Does that mean just installing someone else without a leadership election? Another leader who hasn't got the backing of the public in a general election just wouldn't work. And I think while there are lots of MPs who are very nervous about this, I don't think there are many who are on that side right now that they need to get a new leader.
Yeah, it's also the final day of the SNP conference. Nicola Sturgeon will be making her set-piece speech this afternoon. And then there's this 2-day hearing starting tomorrow at the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court will rule eventually, when they issue their ruling in a couple of months, on whether there could be another independence referendum in Scotland. What do you make of that and the way in which Liz Truss has handled that?
Well, I think it's fair to say that both sides, from the SNP and the Conservative leadership, have made their views very clear early on. We saw from Liz Truss during the leadership election when she was rather critical of Nicola Sturgeon. We saw Nicola Sturgeon yesterday saying that she detests Tories. I think a lot of voters will be, quite frankly, bored of this from both sides and will want kind of just both governments to get on with the day job. And I think that's the danger for Nicola Sturgeon. The Supreme Court ruling, the Supreme Court case, is going to overshadow a lot of what's going on in Scottish politics, as independence has done for the last few years. And a lot of Scottish voters, if you look at the polls, are quite clear that they want other issues tackled first.
Yeah,
go on.
I was just going to say, are you surprised that Nicola Sturgeon, that Liz Truss hasn't picked up the phone to even call Nicola Sturgeon? That's what she said.
Yeah, it's interesting that you hear these different accounts, because it's equally come out that actually they have spoken because they attended services of remembrance to the Queen together, for example. So, you know,
was that a proper chat though at the remembrance service for the Queen? They wouldn't actually talk about policy then, would they?
Well, I mean, they won't publicly say that they spoke about policy, but I'm not sure that they didn't just talk about, what their family life was happening in their family life. I'm sure quietly they were talking about what they could do together.
Yeah.
So she's on the charm offensive. It's a busy week in Westminster. She's got this set of policy lunches, which she's bringing in with a group of sort of 30 Tory MPs at a time, trying to win them over. She's got PMQs, of course, on Wednesday. We're told she's meeting with the 1922 backbenchers. She's asked to swap in instead of Kwasi Kwarteng, who would normally be doing that. And I was reading over the weekend, Sir Graham Brady, of course, the chairman of the 1922 committee, letting it be known that he's not going to change the rules on this year of grace that she's got after the leadership contest unless there is an overwhelming number. And according to him, that number is 178 letters. That's a very high threshold. So reading on from that, this charm offensive has the potential to work. She's got a lot to try and go wrong for.
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, it's quite incredible that we're already at this point, just 4 weeks into her premiership. But she does have time on her side in the sense that she can't be immediately ousted. Everyone wants her to do well. As we've seen, those voices who have been dissenting have said we need to unite. People want her to do well. It's now for her to pick up that mantle and actually prove that she can deliver and unite the party.
Dan, thanks for your thoughts this morning.
You.
Really appreciate it. Dan Falvey, Deputy Digital Political Editor for The Express.
In other news this morning, President Putin has called Saturday's attack on Crimea's Kerch Bridge as an act of terrorism.
Yesterday, at least 13 people were killed and many more injured by Russian missile strikes on the city of Zaporizhia. We're joined by the defence editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox.
Good morning to you, Robert. I mean, the audacity to call this an act of terrorism when, I mean, many people think that Russia is like a terrorist state itself now.
What he's saying is, read my lips, I've been caught by surprise. And this is my prestige thing. It was an enormous bit of infrastructure in capital investment, $4 billion worth of bridge linking Crimea directly with Russia, with help from, I believe, sanctions-busting Dutch engineers to build it. It is the surprise element. This is a desperate man who is likely to do something a little desperate now. He's meeting with his Supreme Security Council, that's the heads of sheds, the FSB, that's the secret police, so-called, and the military. And what does he do? Because he's losing in the field, on the ground in Ukraine, and he hadn't got the troops to replace that yet. He seems to have got a little trick with what he's doing at Zaporizhia. We can talk about that in a minute. I think he's going, as we say, asymmetric. I think they're going to attack infrastructure. And I think that that is a real danger, a real warning to Western allies, particularly UK, about things like oil fields and particularly fibre optic communication cables underwater. This has been flagged up before, but I think there is more than a little evidence that this is the way Russia is going now.
That would be a significant escalation, wouldn't it?
Yes, and I think that, you know, that we do seem to play catch-up rather dramatically. It's very interesting how that there are meetings and heads being banged together, even in Whitehall, to say, what do we do about this? It's actually very difficult for Liz Truss that you've been talking about, because she has said we're behind Ukraine, but there is some query about, you know, can the UK, under these circumstances, give another further £2 to £3 billion towards assisting Ukraine over the next 6 to 9 months, and that's the time period being looked at, and also with it looking likely that the war is going to go through next year. But somebody is saying, no, Ms. Truss, we are vulnerable with our communications, with our oil fields, with our offshore gas in the North Sea. The Norwegians have had trouble with this. They've been warning us, the Danes and the Swedes, who seem to have come to the conclusion that this was an operation to knock the holes in the Nord Stream 2 pipelines, about 5 explosions. And the finger is being put at, don't laugh, because we think we've gone to CBeebies now. It's done by a service called Gugi, G-U-G-I. They're no laughing matter. Yeah. They're underwater saboteurs. They're a special commando. They've been there for some time. They have a system of motherships, 2 mother submarines, releasing mini submarines, and a survey ship which has been active, very active, in UK waters and Irish waters lately, called the Yantar. This is the new way. We love all these terms like asymmetric, hybrid warfare. But this is the way Russia seems to be going at the moment, and it's really putting us on notice because, as you say, Paul, it directly involves us.
Yeah, and, rumours that the Defence Secretary, who's the only one to hold on to his job in the new administration, having fallen out behind the scenes with Liz Truss over her promise to 3% of GDP on defence spending and suggestions that that might be reduced, and he was threatening to resign. I mean, he's denied
$2 billion out of current operational expenditure.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah.
But a huge problem for us, and, concerns that we could be sleepwalking into something much more serious if we're not careful with the situation in Russia.
Well, they're a very difficult situation because one thing that's unexpected is how good, by complete do-it-yourself, come as you are party, the Ukraine armed forces are. The Ukraine army, in its practices and its activity, is so much more potent than anything the British army can offer now.
Really, you'll say it's much more
We're in
effective
trouble.
fighting force than our army.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, because
a lot of people still, I think, have the perception that our army trained their army and...
Yeah, they're very good at training. They're very good at training at the platoon and organisation and motivational level, and truly the Ukrainians are very grateful for that. They say the Brits are very, very good at that. But when you think that we can barely scrape together a tank force of just around 100 or under, and, they now have more active tanks on the front line than the Russians do, they do know how to put things together in this very mixed modern battlefield, and their skills at military improvisation are just way ahead of ours.
UN General Assembly meeting tomorrow. What can we expect from that?
Grandstanding from Russia. What you have to look out for is who is going to stand up for Russia. They will have their former clients and pals, north-south in parts of Asia, but above all Africa. But the other shoe that drops is the Congress of the Communist Party, which opens on the 16th, where Xi is looking for coronation to go on for another 10 years. And the last thing he wants is a nuisance called Vladimir Putin raining on his parade. In nuisance value, Russia is becoming for China almost North Korea writ large. A rather bust-up state with a lot of nukes.
Yeah, it's not getting anything out of that relationship.
At the moment, not.
Right.
Not even much cheap gas or oil. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, always fascinating to talk to you.
Yeah.
Robert Fox, thank you so
very
much, Defence Editor at the Evening Standard. Thank you.
Yeah, it is 6:14. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening this morning. Vigils have been held across County Donegal in memory of the 10 people killed in a petrol station explosion. 8 other people were injured in the blast in the village of Freesat on Friday. Irish authorities say the incident is being treated as a tragic accident, though investigations are ongoing.
Scotland's First Minister is expected to announce a further bid for independence later today. Nicola Sturgeon will close the SNP conference in Aberdeen by telling delegates that UK nations and the Republic of Ireland will always be family. Well, this week, the Supreme Court will rule if a prospective bill to hold another vote is within the powers of Holyrood.
Nearly a quarter of mental health patients are waiting more than 12 weeks to start treatment, with many turning to A&E. Data from the Royal College of Psychiatrists found 43% said the waits for treatment led to their mental health getting worse.
Now then, if you're at home this morning listening to us or watching us on the TV, but you've got that horrible Monday morning feeling in your stomach, you're not alone. Apparently, it's a real thing called the Monday scaries. Or the Sunday scaries, I do believe.
Yeah, because you're scared
of your Monday morning.
Monday morning, yeah.
Have you ever had that?
Sometimes. It depends what your first day of the week's planned, I guess.
Yeah.
And in the job that we do, it can be quite different.
Yes,
So,
especially as a reporter
depends.
being out and about. I have to say, I absolutely love my job, so I haven't experienced it recently, but there was a long period of my life where I had constant anxiety about going to work. And you know what? I do think it's really sad if people spend their life doing a job that they don't really like.
Yeah, well, that's why we're so privileged to do what we do.
Well, absolutely. And, it just feels so wrong if people are actually feeling unwell and, dreading going back to work.
Yeah.
So many people I know do suffer from that. Let us know your thoughts. Have you ever had the Sunday scaries? And keeping a mind diary is thought to perhaps help cure it. So
Yeah.
could that be the way around a good night's sleep on a Sunday ahead of a busy week? Let us know your thoughts this morning.
Also, actually, just very quickly, later on in the programme, we're going to be hearing more details about this slimmed-down coronation for King Charles next year. And I'm just intrigued to know what a slimmed-down coronation should be. And just, because it's going to be shorter, isn't it?
I know, it's outrage. It's going to be 1 hour instead of 4.
Yeah.
That sounds good to me.
And and is he going to take a taxi there instead of the golden carriage?
Less taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
Win-win.
Exactly.
Let us know your views this morning.
Maybe a tie-up with, I don't know, something like Burger King to save on public money.
That's not slimmed down.
You can have like a... No, like... No. Just an idea, anyway. GBviews at gbnews.uk if you want to feed back to us on that one. It is apparently... or it was Brent weekend.
Yes,
in County
indeed.
Down.
We're going to talk about geese now. Castle Espy in County Down are having their Brent weekend, which celebrates the annual arrival of the Canadian Brent geese.
So these birds travel 3,000 miles from the Arctic in Canada to spend the winter in Strangford Loch.
Just a week? God, that's a long round trip, isn't it?
Yeah. Dougie Beattie's been finding out more.
Strangford Loch is a summer destination for leisure activities. But just as we are starting to feel the cold, new holiday makers arrive.
These birds fly down from the Canadian high Arctic every year to this part of Strangford Loch, travelling over 3,000 miles, and it's the eelgrass here that attracts them. And it's one of the most amazing wildlife spectacles in Europe, and here it is in Northern Ireland.
Paul Stewart is the manager in Castle Espy Wetland Centre and monitors the Brent geese that holiday here.
Normally you think of birds migrating, you think of them leaving and going south to warmer climes. And that's what's happening with the Brent geese. They're leaving in Canada and they're coming down here. So we think our winters are cold and horrible. Actually, and compared to northern Canada, the climate here is quite mild. So migration can work both ways.
Strangford's rhythm of life is a finely balanced one. As the swallows go south, the mackerel comes in and the geese touch down. The shoreline here is riddled by the scars of an industrial past, but nature's ability to fill the void has encouraged man to look after its wildlife.
So it's amazing to think that this habitat here actually used to be the site of a lot of heavy industry. There was quarrying here, there were brickworks, and there were schooners used to come in and take the bricks away, and there were lime kilns here for creating lime. So it was a very, there was a lot of heavy industry going on here, not the sort of thing you'd associate with wildlife. But then when the brickworks closed in the latter half of the 19th century, nature subsumed all these old quarries. And now what was an industrial site is now a wildlife bonanza, really. The mosaic of wetland habitats here is really quite exceptional.
An estimated 25,000 birds have now arrived and will stay to the early new year. They will then begin the whole circle once more. Dougie Beattie, GB News.
There you go, some geezers for you on a Monday morning.
After the break, this is a really interesting segment. We're going to be talking about a new test that could help detect postnatal depression before the baby is even born. Can you imagine that? That you might have a predisposition to postnatal depression.
And would you want to know?
Of course, because forewarned is forearmed. We'll be discussing all of that, really interesting developments after your Monday forecast. Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking early rain clearing the southeast with sunny spells following scattered showers in the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Well, a dry and locally chilly start to the day with plenty of sunshine, although a little cloud is possible at first in the east. Breezy, especially along northern coasts at first. Cloud and patchy rain will take most of the morning to fully clear, but dry and sunny conditions will follow from the north. Breezy around coastal areas with an isolated shower possible across North Wales. Otherwise, it will be dry with plenty of sunshine for all. A rather breezy day, especially towards the northwest, where the odd isolated shower is possible during the morning. Otherwise, it will be dry with plenty of prolonged sunny spells for all. It will be a dry day, but also rather breezy, especially over the hills and coasts, and there will be some patchy cloud, but also plenty of prolonged sunny spells throughout the rest of the day. Rather windy, especially in the west, where local gales are possible at first. Scattered showers are also likely in the west, drier in the east with sunny spells for all. Windy with coastal gales possible at first. Showers are likely in the north, but drier elsewhere. Some cloud at times, but plenty of sunny spells are expected throughout the day. So showers and winds will ease in the northwest, but elsewhere remaining dry with sunny or clear spells into the evening. And that's how the weather is shaping up for your Monday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's coming up to 25 minutes past 6. Still to come on the programme this Monday morning.
Stay warm without increasing your energy bills. At 6:45, Kate Hardcastle will be sharing her top tips to sealing in the heat. It's all about keeping your body warm, apparently,
So heat your body rather
than the whole room.
Okay, makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that what a lot of people are doing anyway?
Well, perhaps not enough. Plus, it's World Mental Health Day today. At 7:45, we'll discover the surprising benefits that plants can bring to us, how they can help to boost our mind. Are you into gardening, green-fingered at all?
Yeah, sort of a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you've got the plants in your room, but it's also cold, then you're gonna have to get plants that like the cold, right? So otherwise, so you've got to marry all this up.
Well, they'll still be warmer inside than out, and most plants survive all right outside, so I don't think we need to stress too much about plants keeping warm this winter. Got enough to worry about. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Let us know your thoughts this morning, or you can tweet us at GB News.
It is 6:25. A new discovery by scientists means that pregnant women could be diagnosed with postnatal depression before they give birth.
Well, with an average of 1 in 10 new mothers being diagnosed in the UK, a new blood test that uses cell activity to detect the condition during pregnancy could prove vital to many mums-to-be. Well, Dr. Sarvan Subunsian was a senior author of this groundbreaking study, and I'm pleased to say joins us now from the States. Very good morning to you. This is all about RNA research, isn't it, which some of us became familiar with during the COVID vaccine rollout, this new concept of sort of cell analysis. Tell us how it's being applied to pregnancy and postnatal depression.
So essentially what we did is we looked at this thing called extracellular RNA communication. And what we've done up to this point is that we've really looked at what's inside the cell, but there's a lot happening outside of the cell. So cells release these things called extracellular vesicles. And you can think of these as little rafts or little vessels that carry RNA and protein between cells. And so this is a way that cells can talk with each other. And what's become evident is that this is really important during pregnancy. So this is a way that the cells from the mom and cells from the baby can actually communicate with each other. And we know this is important because when this communication is messed up or, is that it's faulty, it causes disease. So things like preterm birth, preeclampsia, which is high blood pressure during pregnancy, and gestational diabetes are all associated with abnormal levels of extracellular vesicles. So we decided that we wanted to look at these mRNAs that are in extracellular vesicles in postpartum depression. So what we did is that we looked at moms during the pregnancy and 6 months after they gave birth. So we did this in blood samples. And what we found was the mRNA levels in EVs are actually hugely different during pregnancy in moms who went on to develop postpartum depression. And this is very exciting because exactly like you said, is that this is a way that we may be able to predict who's going to develop the disease and develop all sorts of early interventions.
That's fascinating, but is it possible to rule out that it's not just a causal link, that these women that develop things like preeclampsia or early gestational diabetes have problems and therefore they're more likely to have, postnatal depression?
No. I'm sorry, is that what I was trying to say is that extracellular vesicles are involved in this. In our study, these women did not suffer from gestational diabetes or other issues. So, this is a process. It's science. There's always something new. So there's these extracellular RNAs that we didn't really know about. And now we're looking at them. And, they're involved in all sorts of things associated with pregnancy.
So this could be turned into a blood test that women could take at the start of pregnancy, and that would give them an indication as to whether they are more susceptible to postnatal depression.
That's the goal. Right now, what we're doing is that we have a test that is looking at thousands of different mRNAs. And, and it's very expensive at the moment. So what we're trying to do is to narrow it down to 5 to 10 mRNAs that we can measure at a cost-effective rate that could be implemented in a clinical setting. So that's our goal right now.
And do you think there is an appetite for people to know? I mean, we were just discussing amongst the ladies in the newsroom this morning whether you'd want to know if you had a predisposition. Personally, I would want to know because I think forewarned is forearmed, and you can build in some of your, postpartum period with therapy or making sure you've got lots of support. But some of the others were saying, I wouldn't want to know.
I mean, I would say that there's all sorts of screening tests for cancer. There's cancer screening for breast cancer, skin cancer, prostate cancer, and, it's a tool for people, and you can choose not to do it. And what we want to do is make the tool available for clinicians and women who are concerned about this. Right now is that they do not have such a tool. That's our goal.
Well, fascinating. Really interesting to talk to you. Thank you so much for talking to us about this research. Good luck with rolling it out into a more sort of widely available test. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the face of it, it seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to know so you can get help and support.
Knowledge is power, always.
Exactly, and be proactive. gbviews@gbnews.uk if you want to feed back to us on that one after the break. We're going through your Monday morning papers with Tessie Ojo and Nigel Nelson.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It is 6:32. We'll go through the papers in just a moment, but before that, let's bring you up to date with what is happening this morning.
The Conservative MP for Chelsea and Fulham has been elected as the new International Trade Minister. Greg Hands replaces MP Conor Burns, who was sacked last week following allegations of misconduct. The new Secretary of State tweeted the appointment had been an honour and a privilege.
Cabinet Minister Nadeem Zahawi is warning delay is our biggest enemy. Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster says the party must focus on delivering for the country. It's amid tensions following a senior Tory MP who warned that the current mood in the party is febrile, with many backbenchers very concerned where they are in the polls.
England captain Harry Kane will swap goals for reading bedtime stories as he appears on CBeebies later. The 29-year-old is the latest star to have delivered a story, including the Princess of Wales, Harry Styles and Steve Carroll.
I'm looking forward to that. I don't normally watch it, but just for that occasion. The Russian president has accused Ukraine of an act of terrorism following a blast that damaged Russia's only bridge to occupied Crimea. Vladimir Putin claimed the explosion was aimed at destroying important civilian infrastructure. It follows Russian missile strikes on residential blocks in the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia, killing at least 13 people and injuring around 87 others, including 10 children.
Right, time to go through your papers this morning. We're joined by the CEO of the Diana Awards, Tessie Ojo, and the political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. A warm welcome to both of you on this Monday morning. Thanks for joining us. Tessie, you want to start with The Guardian this morning. We were just talking about it in the bulletin there, and this is the rebels piling in on the Prime Minister over the benefits real-term cuts. It feels as though a U-turn is in the offing, doesn't it?
Yes, but I'm just thinking, why are we even here? Like, you know, the research shows that almost extra 450,000 people will be put in poverty if we do not get this right. And I just think we shouldn't even be here. We shouldn't be here. Like, we are the fifth wealthiest nation in the world, and yet we have people who are in full-time employment and still need food bank. We have a whole generation who are going to be pushed into poverty. And it just blows my mind that we are still, you know, talking about having cuts or trying to, what was the word that was used? Using operating benefit in line with earnings rather than inflation. I just think that we can do better as a country. We can definitely do better.
Yeah, Nigel, make it make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think she will U-turn. If she doesn't, we're all heading for a general election, because this is the hill that Tory MPs are prepared to die on. I was up in Birmingham at the conference and talked to a load of them, and they're all saying, look, even if we bring the government down, even if we have to face a general election and get a wipeout, we are not going to vote for this. So on the basis of that, if she doesn't change tack, then probably it's all over. And it's the right thing to do. I think that Tess is absolutely right, that it was mad. They've made a promise that they would actually uprate benefits in line with inflation. Quite clearly it's necessary. To halve that figure was just never on.
Oh, and why did she halve that figure? Just
save money.
To try and save money?
Yeah, basically. I mean, if you can link it to earnings rather than inflation, you say, you save a huge amount of money. Yeah. I mean, you are talking about sort of 4 million universal credit claimants. So it's quite a lot of dosh that actually they would bring back. But what they're meant to be doing is solving the cost of living crisis. Absolutely. That was what the mini-budget was meant to be about, not to give tax cuts for millionaires. It was to actually do that. They haven't done that. Tory MPs are really angry about this. This is what they were there to promise to do, and that's why I think she's got to turn back.
OK, and do you expect that to happen imminently today or this week, or when do you think we'll get some sort of...
I think that, she doesn't actually have to do anything until the 19th.
But the longer she leaves the question mark out there, I mean, in every interview I've seen her do recently, she sort of said, decision hasn't been made.
That's right.
Which you read to mean, I'm going to U-turn on this, but I'm not ready to talk about it.
Well, I mean, I think that she can that's her kind of get-out-of-jail-free card, that it's not a U-turn technically, because she is quite right. Decision not made. On October the 19th, decision will be made, and if she makes the right one, then her premiership carries on for a little bit longer.
Yeah, Tessie, just show that she's listening. That's what she said. I listen to people, and that's a good thing, right?
That's a good thing, but we treat this government, this current government, like it's a different government from the one we had 12 years ago. It's not. It's the same. We shouldn't be here in the first place. We should have got it right. We saw what happened during the pandemic. We saw that actually everyone's pressed. Everyone wants something different. The act of listening shouldn't just be happening just now. We could have got this right. This was meant, as Nigel said, to be a mini budget that helped. But what it's done is push people further into poverty.
Yeah.
And that's just...
Well, I suppose her argument
right.
also is that growth eventually helps everybody to become better off, and that is what she's pushing for, and you have to make these difficult decisions along the way. But Whitehall waste is becoming one of the big issues for them, Nigel. This is in the Mirror, your paper, well, your weekday version of your paper. Tories waste £4 billion on botched projects. So what are those?
Not new. The government often wastes a lot of money, especially the MOD. They're not mentioned in this one. Right. Because they always buy the wrong missiles that don't fit the other bits of it and things like that. What this is $4 billion, which could have obviously gone on other things. It would pay, for instance, for a 1p tax cut on basic rate for a year. What the Mirror is saying, it's $1 billion of fraud and error at the business department. That was all our COVID support stuff. And a lot of that money went to the wrong places. We then go down a bit to almost the ridiculous ones, which is we've lost 8 million getting rid of those old burgundy passports because we wanted blue ones that were more British than the old EU ones. My understanding was they'd let those burgundy ones run out before we turned over to the blue ones. But certainly, last passport I got, which was about a year ago, had a blue passport. And there's another £800,000 lost because we bought air tickets to remove migrants, and of course we couldn't send them to Rwanda. So an awful lot of waste here. I mean, this is a constant kind of refrain that what they need to do, obviously, is police this much better. Equally, targeting waste like this is much better than cutting back on departmental spending. What Liz Truss has threatened to do is to cut budgets by 10% of the various government departments. That will hurt people. Better to save money.
Tessie, we always hear this, don't we, about the cutting back on bureaucracy and waste and middle management. It's something that politicians constantly hammer time and time again, and they never seem to get... Nothing changes.
Absolutely. I would have loved to see this government come on and say, actually, we're going to focus on efficiency. That's how to begin to improve our economy, right? If we get... I mean, if you think about... Let's flip back to the COVID and all of the different waste that happened there when we were thinking about, what was that buying different materials, PPE, that's right, and the truckload of PPE that arrived and was the wrong type, and all of that. If we want to, even businesses across the country are looking at how can we be more efficient, how can we be more effective, how can we cut prices. Well, we want the government to lead the way. We don't want to see stories like this, because stories like this just tells us that if you do not get your house in order, why are you trying to get the country in order?
Let's turn our attention to Boris Johnson, possibly making a comeback, according to Nadine Dorries. She said, don't rule it out. But I was also reading this in a few papers over the weekend, the suggestion that Rishi Sunak's been having chats behind the scenes, that Boris Johnson reportedly saying perhaps it's too soon, he wants to go make some money first. What's the article in the Times saying this morning?
Yeah, Boris Johnson is comparatively very poor on the basis of being Prime Minister, so he wants to get a few million in his pocket.
He'll have no problem doing that, I'm sure.
Well, probably not, no. I mean, he just goes on the lecture circuit and writes a few books.
Yeah, he's been writing his memoirs, hasn't he? Well.
I think a Johnson comeback, whatever Nadine says, is probably pretty unlikely. I mean, the impression at the moment is that again, talking to MPs at the conference, they were clutching at straws. It was things like, how do we get rid of Liz Truss? How do we do it by bypassing the party membership, which would infuriate the party membership? But ideas came up where you actually get MPs to decide the next leader, like the old system, rather than put it out to the party membership. Of course, the party membership would be furious about that if they were sidelined. And they're the ones, the 170,000 of them, they're the ones who go out, do the work, they do the canvassing in the rain and put the leaflets through the door.
Well, maybe they can be included in some way, deciding the first round or whatever.
The argument from the MPs is they got the wrong leader. The MPs voted for Rishi Sunak. The party membership decided differently, as everyone expected them to do if Liz Truss got to the final two. And as I say, they were clutching at straws, looking at ways of how can we bypass them, but really difficult.
But I mean, it's the MPs who ousted Boris Johnson, and now there's clamours for him to come back.
I'll just say, can we just have an election, please? I mean, I think I did a tweet a couple of days ago saying, all of the crises that we are experiencing right now, if we look at 20-somethings, 20, 21-year-olds, they never voted. They didn't have the opportunity to vote because they were probably just coming up to 18, were just not old enough. Can we just allow them to have a say in what's happening right now? And let's stop this in-housing, this back and forth. Like, let's just stop it, please. And I mean, that's my view. My view is, there's so much going on right now. We have an entire generation of growing adults who didn't vote because they were just not old enough. There's so many decisions that need to be made right now. I just think let's go to an election.
Put it to the people.
100%. And get away from this party members. Let's just take it to the people. And
GBViews at gbnews.uk if you think we should have an election. Also, Tessie, front page of the Mail. A coronation fit for a cut-price king, right? How do you feel about that? Do you like? Were you looking forward to a coronation with all the bells and whistles? Or?
I'm sure there'll still be bells and whistles, by the way.
I'm sure.
Less bells and whistles.
I don't think we're going to be axing those in our what is it?
I think that we are in a very difficult period, and I think that anything that reflects the mood of the nation, anything that reflects actually the fact that we are in a crisis. Will be welcomed by the entire nation. And I think we can do things without losing the very thing that makes us British, the very thing that makes us unique in celebrations. We can do all of that, but on a budget.
Yeah, he's a listen king, isn't he? Yeah. He's listening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's absolutely right. That a lot of people are suffering. All he's talking about is taking down the numbers of guests from 8,000 to 2,000. 2,000 is quite a lot for a party. So on the basis of that, I think that he's on the right track here.
Yeah. And what about catering? He could slim down
catering?
on that. Could just have a DJ.
Yeah, I don't think you sort of rushed onto McDonald's at the end of it. I think you need
if you considerably cut down numbers already, that slashed your catering costs, right?
Exactly.
That's true.
8,000 down to 2,000 is significant, isn't it? In terms of numbers, and 4 hours down to 1. I mean, do we really want to sit through 4 hours of a coronation? That poor old queen.
Well, they don't happen every day.
We sat through the funeral. That was quite long, and I think that was a tremendous event. It was a historic event. So are coronations. I think an hour is probably a bit short. I mean, perhaps we could go to 2 hours. 2 hours I can manage.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, OK.
I wonder, actually, in slimming that down by an hour, so does that mean that, I can't remember who conducts it, but they're going to have less words to say?
Yeah,
I make you king. And then he sticks it on his head. And then
I think you have to do, constitutionally, you have to go through the coronation vows.
Yeah.
But all the bits on the side they could get rid of,
Yeah, that was the very slimmed down version, by the way. Right.
Should we talk about? Should we talk about Putin? He's calling this bridge blast an act of terrorism. Of course, it's devastating for him because it links him to his annexed Crimea. But you know, the irony of it all. It was on the front of the Telegraph this morning. I mean, for him to be calling things acts of terrorism.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a nerve, really.
Yeah, well, no surprise.
The whole thing is that he's invaded Ukraine. There's a war going on, although no responsibility has been claimed for this attack on the Crimea Bridge. It's an act of war. And if you're in a war, an act of war is right. The idea of actually then suggesting it's terrorism is rather on the lines of suggesting that by the Germans, the French resistance during the war were terrorists. I mean, there was a war going on. The danger, I think, here is what Vladimir Putin does in retaliation. And that's the more serious side and the thing that we actually need to worry about.
We've already seen this attack on Zaporizhia and lots of people dead, including children there. And as you say, just the rhetoric growing up and building up. And we heard from Robert Fox, didn't we, in the last few moments, saying that, you know, this could be a new kind of escalation in terms of attacking infrastructure, you know, like we've seen with Nord Stream, but also with communications. And in which case, you know, the West will be forced to sit up at some point and realise, because, you know, suggesting we were sort of sleepwalking into all of this.
Yeah.
Very worrying situation there.
Yeah. Just finally, we'll be talking about this later on in the programme, actually. Nigel, front of the Mail or page 2, is Suella, as in the Home Secretary, set to make cannabis a Class A drug?
This seems to be what she wants to do. It does seem to be a bit out of kilter with the rest of the world. I mean, America is now talking about downgrading it rather than the upgrade that she's
America's
talking
also talking about banning abortion, so we don't necessarily have to follow what America does.
No, I mean, we don't have to, but I mean, what it would mean is that rather than 5-year maximum terms for possession, you'd end up with 7 years. I think there needs to be a full debate about drug use in this country. Do we make it a public health issue or do we keep it a criminal issue?
I mean, we've had this debate multiple times in this country, and it seems over the years everybody has always come to the consensus that this shouldn't be criminal. Treating it as a criminal offence is not a good way of dealing with it. And yet we continue to pursue that path.
Absolutely. And then the question is, let's look at the people who are most likely going to be criminalised. Who are those likely victims? Is it people who already have multiple issues they're dealing with, multiple health issues, multiple mental health issues? Are we then going to turn those people into criminals? And I think this is much more a health issue that needs a wider, more robust debate than criminalising.
Yeah, those who deal it, though, apparently would, instead of getting 14 years, they would get life. Is that a good thing?
I think this needs to come back to a health debate, firstly.
That's the dealers, not the people who are found in
Prisons already full, aren't they?
Exactly.
No, I'm just putting her argument forward. That's not my personal
I'm just asking whether or not...
Well, I think we can, in some sense, I don't think that we can isolate one group from the other. We need to look at this as look at the questions, why, what's going on here, and let's look at it robustly before we begin this whole criminalisation.
Well, she says it would send a cultural and political signal that it is unacceptable if it were to be upgraded to...
I do agree that there needs to come to a place where we are looking at taking a hard stance on drugs, because there are people's lives who are devastated by drugs. And I do think there needs to be, especially young people, especially vulnerable groups. When we think about the whole county lines, young people who are lured into this thing, you don't ever get the big guys. You only get those people who are lured. And if you look at the demography, those young people who are usually pulled into this, there's always multiple reasons why they're dead. Some of them are funding their entire families. And that's why it's not as simple as criminalisation. It's about, let's look at the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, it's an argument with a nuanced argument, isn't it? Sure. Tessie, thanks. And Nigel, thank you to you as well. More from them in the next hour. And do let us know, by the way, if you think that cannabis should be classified reclassified as a Class A drug. GB Views at gbnews.uk. We're talking about that later on in the programme.
Yes, it's coming up to 10 to 7. In fact, it is 10 to 7. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour. Vigils have been held across County Donegal in memory of the 10 people who were killed in a petrol station explosion. 8 other people were injured in the blast in the village of Creesler on Friday. Irish authorities say the incident's been treated as a tragic accident. The investigations are ongoing.
Scotland's First Minister is expected to announce a further bid for independence. Nicola Sturgeon will close the SNP conference in Aberdeen today by telling delegates that UK nations and the Republic of Ireland will always be family. This week, the Supreme Court will rule if a prospective bill to hold another vote is within the powers of Holyrood.
Nearly a quarter of mental health patients are waiting more than 12 weeks to start treatment, with many turning to A&E. Data from the Royal College of Psychiatrists found 43% said the waits for treatment led to their mental health getting worse.
So energy bills, a big worry for a lot of us with the winter on its way. Question is, how can we keep costs down?
Well, I know somebody who's got lots of suggestions. Consumer and retail expert Kate Hardcastle's in the studio with us this morning. I see you have your scarf on. It's
Good
very
morning.
wise in this air-conditioned studio. But you've got lots of tips about keeping your body warm as opposed to the room you're in.
Yeah, I think we do that, but actually we're quite guilty of just flicking the switch for the heating, aren't we? And we shouldn't be, let's just preface this, we shouldn't be having this conversation. We should be having means that allow us to use our fuel as we wish. But the reality is that from October the 1st, we know that we've seen that rise in energy rates. And I think anything you can do at home puts you into a better mode of practice. So these are 3 things that I've found really useful over the last year. First is my heated poncho. Now, I know this is not the look, Isabel, for a glamorous lady like you, but I want you to go with me on this journey. This is something where you're heating yourself with an electric blanket that kind of clips around you. Honestly, you are really warm, toasty in a matter of minutes. It costs just pence to run for the hour. And you can, if you maybe working from home or maybe having a read. So it's an electric blanket and it literally press studs down the arms, creates like a poncho style. And you can buy them from about £40 upwards, places like Old Day.
Should point out that was an electric blanket we were showing a picture of, not one of the ponchos. But you say, stay with you on this. You might be surprised to learn that because I'm quite cold-blooded, my husband actually bought me a gilet, which has what looks like a phone charger, battery pack type things in the pockets, and it keeps you warm, because when I was out and about as a reporter on the road, I was always freezing doing lives. And he now wears it to work because his air-conditioned office is so freezing. So, and they are really effective, really effective. And as you say, low cost, and you don't actually have to keep them plugged in all the time. You can use it charged up with battery. So I like that tip.
Okay, so that's the first one.
And double use as well, because you wear it through the day, then you pop it on the bed, warm the bed up, a couple of pence on the bed, you're not heating the room throughout the evening, keeps you nice and toasty. As I said, about £40 you can buy those from. Next is my heated airer. Now, this can cause quite a controversy because it's a tumble dryer versus the heated airer, and the idea is... Here we go. Yeah, so this is you put in basically you're putting the clothes on it, letting them dry. It plugs in. You can also get little tents that go over them, which make them a little bit more effective in terms of the heat and keeping it fanned round the clothes. The thing is with these, they do cost a lot less to run, but they take time. So even with the time, maybe 6 to 8 hours for a traditional load, it is cheaper than a tumble dryer. And we know that the tumble dryer is one of the most energy hungry devices in the home. That said, it's got to be a place that you can give space for an airer. You've got to be able to have the time to monitor it, keep on top of it, and put it on when you're in the house as well. So there's cost efficiency to be had in terms of running it, but if you do want that quick fix of just getting a few items tumble dried, it's not that great.
You could also buy one of those plug adapters that has a timer on, so if you're going out, you can make sure it automatically switches off. And I think the other benefit to that is it won't make your house as damp. If you were just doing a normal clothes horse when your clothes were drying slowly, perhaps it means there's less moisture in the air if it's got a little bit of and that might mean less rot and damp in your house, which is really important when you're trying to keep the house warm.
Completely. And the long term on this, as well as the sustainability elements, is actually it looks after your clothes. in a lot better way. Tumble dry is not great friction-wise for clothing. And actually over the long term, because I've had these items at least 12, 18 months, I'm noticing that the clothes are wearing a lot better because they're just on this heated air dryer rather than the tumble dryer just rotating and getting the impact.
Yeah.
Third item I wanted to bring to you, although it needs really no announcement because it's gone crazy in terms of sales, is the air fryer. Do you have an air fryer?
No. Explain to me how this works. I hear people raving about this.
So do I, yeah.
It's a no-brainer. Now, for an air fryer, I've seen them as low as £30 to £40 and actually some on eBay for resale, which can be checked out as well, so you get the reassurance with it. But it's food from your protein, so great for fish. I do fish and broccoli in there, absolutely perfect. It actually tastes better, genuinely. But massive cost difference between this and switching on your conventional oven. It really does make a difference. Nearly a full meal in there. You can put your spuds in there too, or rice. It makes huge impact. It's an air fryer, so it's basically giving a fry without the perhaps unhealthy benefits associated with unhealthy elements of it, Ram. So it's just
the programme with
how does it work? How does it work?
You shove the food in and you press go.
like my dad
That's
now.
how it works. And it's a matter of pence. It's a really big difference. So this is one of the biggest savings. Really think it's worth investing in it. Try and leave the oven alone.
See, that's what I like. There's a health benefit as well as a cost benefit, as well as an environmental benefit and a sustainability
I like
benefit.
that, air fryer.
Top tips.
Excellent.
Kate,
thank you, Kate.
Thank you for opening up on Monday morning.
Right, coming up, we're going to be talking about school meals and the shocking effect food shortages are having on them.
Coming up in a moment.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
The PM faces another big U-turn as Tory rebels warn of a backlash against her benefits cuts plan.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. It's Monday, the 10th of October. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Paul Hawkins.
Our top stories this morning then, Cabinet Ministers urging the Conservative Party to reunite after another week of infighting. Dozens of backbenchers warning they'll rebel against benefits rising in line with earnings rather than September's inflation figures.
President Putin has called Saturday's attack on Crimea's Kerch Bridge an act of terrorism. It comes as 13 people were killed yesterday by Russian missile strikes in the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia.
It's World Mental Health Day today, with 1 in 4 of us struggling every year. As the government prepares to announce a £122 million support package for workers, we'll discover the best ways to seek help and improve our well-being.
And a slimmed-down ceremony for a slimmed-down monarchy. We'll have more details about King Charles's coronation expected to take place next summer.
You can drop us a line. As usual, we love you getting involved with the conversation. GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
So our top story this hour, and Cabinet Ministers, including Suella Braverman and Penny Mordaunt, have pleaded for the Conservative Party to show loyalty to the Prime Minister.
It comes as another big U-turn is reportedly on the cards, with several Tory MPs warning the government they would lose a vote on a real terms cut to benefits.
Well, joining us now for all the latest analysis is the Deputy Digital Political Editor of the Daily Express, Dan Falvey. Good morning to you, Dan. Look, lots of work then to be done for the Prime Minister. Calls for loyalty, but she's going on a bit of a charm offensive this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both sides here are looking to meet each other halfway to unite the party. We've got backbenchers being told you need to show loyalty, but we've equally got at the top the Prime Minister saying, look, I'm willing to listen to your concerns and I'll meet you halfway to make sure that we can do what we need to unify the party. So she's planning to hold a number of meetings with backbench MPs over the coming weeks to kind of gauge what their opinion is on a number of issues and make sure that they know that she is listening and that she's not purely going to dictate from the top.
Yeah, we're calling it a U-turn, but she hasn't actually said what she would do.
Yes, so there's been lots of talk over the last couple of weeks about what was going to happen with benefits and the fact that the government was considering increasing them in line with earnings rather than with inflation. But Liz Truss has always said that a decision was yet to be made. That is her get-out clause that allows her to say that no U-turn has been made. But given that everyone was just expecting it in the first place to rise with benefits, the fact that there was then this awkwardness about what would it, wouldn't it, it sounds like a U-turn, it feels like a U-turn, and in the eyes of the British public, therefore, it will be a U-turn. Whether it is or that isn't, that is the way it's going to be perceived.
Yeah.
Although, do the British public really object to U-turns as much as perhaps we in the media like to think? I mean, people generally like to see politicians who can be persuaded, don't they, by alternative arguments and change course? I mean, what's the sort of polling impact of this kind of decision?
Yeah, absolutely. The British public would far rather, when a mistake has been made, that they had a politician who was willing to put their hands up and say, look, I get it, I'm changing course. That's what we saw when it came to the 45p tax rate. Liz Truss announced that they're planning to scrap the 45p tax rate for the highest earners. It went down very badly, and she said, we have listened and we get it. She told them, I understand. The problem is, when you do a number of U-turns, I mean, this would be the second big U-turn in just a number of weeks, and she is only 4 weeks into her premiership. That's when I think the British public start to get nervous. Is this someone with a plan? I think that's when they begin to think maybe this isn't someone in control of the situation.
Yeah, it feels like it's a symptom of political ideology rubbing up against actual politics, which is, this is what I believe in, but I'm going to have to do a U-turn because the actual politics suggests that I can't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the big problem Liz Truss has is the fact that she is still... It was a Conservative government before her, and it was a Conservative government that said that benefits would rise with inflation. So it's that internal row. It's the fact that it's not that she's doing something different to a Labour Prime Minister. It's against what Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak set out.
Yeah, well, which she was part of. Let's not forget, she was the longest-standing member of Cabinet in the leadership contest. Can we just talk about the shaky ground that she's on? I mean, there's lots of concern that she's had a terrible start to her premiership. But are they realistically going to replace her? I mean, how much is her position in threat, do you think?
Well, in the short term, I don't think there's any real threat to her being replaced. There's lots of murmurs and rumours about could they topple her.
I mean, Grant Shapps, he's got a running commentary, hasn't he? A spreadsheet, 237 recent conversations with Tory MPs with doubts on her libertarian and economic policies, 10 days to turn things around, or we might as well roll the dice and elect a new leader.
The Shapps spreadsheet.
And over the weekend, I read the phrase, if we're facing ridicule or electoral defeat, we'd rather have ridicule and go for another leader.
Yes, and there are those making that case, but quite frankly, I don't think the British public would stand for another Conservative leadership election. The alternative is that they just put someone in as an interim. But again, the idea of putting someone in who hasn't gone through a general election, I don't think is going to go down well with the British public. I think now what the Conservative Party, on the whole, what they realise they need to do is unify. And as we said at the start, it's about meeting halfway from both sides, the top and the bottom.
Could the SNP conference provide some material for unifying?
Always. There's one thing that you can guarantee, and that's that when it comes to the SNP, the Conservatives are united. Yeah. Nicola Sturgeon yesterday morning spoke about detesting Tories, and that is something that will rile up...
Mutual feelings, probably.
Mutual feelings, probably. But that will rile up every Conservative MP, and they can all get behind that. And I'm sure when it comes to Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, Liz Truss will be using that to her advantage to get the MPs behind her cheering on the backbenches.
Yeah, I think Nadeem Zahawi called it divisive, I think. Do you think that that's a correct way to... I mean, I detest the Tories, is that...
He spoke divisive. He also spoke about dangerous, about the fact that we need a bit of... when it comes civil language when it comes to politics, and speaking about detesting your opponents just isn't the kind of...
Although she did later clarify it was about the policies, it wasn't the people or the party, it was the policies and their kind of effects thereof. That was what she said.
Well, that's what she said. It's not actually what she said to begin with, though. She clarified, but she didn't apologise.
She did a U-turn.
She did a U-turn.
She did a U-turn, yeah. Dan, thanks for your thoughts this morning. Cheers, Dan.
Indeed.
Dan Felby from the Express. It is 7 minutes past 7. Should we talk about the SNP conference while we're at it?
Yeah, in fact, we might even go there. It is the final day of the SNP conference with Nicola Sturgeon. She'll be reiterating her desire to push through next year's planned independence referendum.
Yeah, for the latest, we can go to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is live for us in Aberdeen this morning. Good morning to you, Darren. What can we expect from her speech later today, especially given we have that two-day hearing at the Supreme Court starting tomorrow?
Yeah, really fascinating, isn't it, Paul, that actually over the last couple of days, really what has dominated SNP conference, potentially unsurprisingly, is this issue of independence and Scotland's place within the United Kingdom. We know that the SNP have set out their plan, and that is essentially to use the Supreme Court, and those hearings start tomorrow, though they could last for several months, to try and see whether Holyrood, whether MSPs have got the constitutional ability to hold a referendum. Nicola Sturgeon would like that in October of next year. If that is not the case, and most people seem to think that will not be the case, that the power ultimately resides in Westminster, where the British government have repeatedly said no, 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 that Nicola Sturgeon will use the Westminster elections in 2024 as a kind of de facto referendum. Now, again, most people don't think necessarily that would work in the sense that general elections are not referendums, but that is the SNP's plan, and it's been much talked about at this conference. It's kind of almost been the rock on which this conference has been built, and that has, I think, led to frustrations actually to lots of Scottish voters who frankly think actually the SNP should stop focusing on independence at the moment during our cost of living crisis, should actually be talking about what they're going to do this winter, about taxation, about energy security. And I think actually I was listening into a Nicola Sturgeon press conference yesterday. I get the sense that actually her speech later on this afternoon will focus a lot more on those kind of day-to-day politics issues. We had some pretty robust attacks of the Conservative Party yesterday, not least of all Nicola Sturgeon's words in that interview, but also attacks in terms of financial management, and indeed about their ability to manage the economy at this difficult time. And also, Paul, interestingly, attacks on Labour too. Now, why is that? Well, Labour have suddenly shot up in the polls recently here in Scotland, reflecting that national picture. Is that making the SNP a little uneasy? I think it probably is, though Nicola Sturgeon would suggest that actually Labour are taking the votes from the Conservative Party and not necessarily from the Scottish Nationalists themselves.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Darren, thank you for that. It's our political editor, Darren McCaffrey in Aberdeen for the final day of the SNP conference.
Yeah, it's a glorious sunrise there as well. Thank you, Darren. Now, since 2013, the number of disabled people in employment's increased by 1.5 million.
But that still leaves almost half of all people with a disability out of work, and for many, it's hard to find meaningful employment.
Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has been finding out more.
In the UK, 1 in 5 of the working age population are considered to be disabled, and yet many of these people struggle to find employment.
Do you like working with me?
2 times, yeah.
2, sometimes.
Meet the standout brothers. Ross has Down syndrome and has previously struggled to find work. That was until his brother, Christian, stepped in to help.
We started with free socks, didn't we?
Yeah, but hey guys.
Got 22 now, launched a company with free socks.
A lot. It socks like 8 colours, black lace here, bad boys here.
What began as a way to get Ross out of the house during lockdown has now turned into meaningful employment for both brothers.
So Ross's big dream is to go to Tokyo, Japan, so hopefully the business will be able to make that happen. For myself, I'd love to help people that are in Ross's position. They're not just socks, for example. People see them and say, what are they about? And you can say...
Good make.
They're a good make, yeah. And you can tell people about our Ross, and you can tell people about what we're trying to do. And then hopefully further down the line, we'll be able to start employing, which is the big dream, innit?
All times.
However, for many in Ross's position, they don't have a brother like Christian to step in and help. Why is it so important to you, disability equality, to help people with disabilities to find employment?
I think it's really important that disabled people can, and know they can, live in the real world. So that's everything from education to employment to housing to socialising to leisure, etc. And it's really important because disabled people have a lot to offer.
But it's an ongoing battle. Mel has worked there for 25 years and she still says her work isn't done.
The problem we have got is tackling negative attitudes. So that's really difficult. So what we still see is lots of those negative attitudes, lots of the I don't think you can do that. So whilst the physical environment is changing, I think there's still a long way to go around attitudes.
But things are changing, and for the Standout brothers, they'll continue to put their best sock forward. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Well, the time is at 7:12. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour. And a bit of breaking news this morning. Several explosions have hit the centre of Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. It's after Russia's President Putin accused Ukraine of the Kerch bridge bombing, calling it an act of terror. The bridge connects occupied Crimea and Russia and was damaged by a truck explosion at the weekend.
Vigils have been held across County Donegal in memory of the 10 people killed in a petrol station explosion. 8 other people were injured in the blast in the village of Chrysler on Friday. Irish authorities say the incident is being treated as a tragic accident, though investigations are ongoing.
Scotland's First Minister is expected to announce a further bid for independence later today. Nicola Sturgeon will close the SNP conference in Aberdeen today by telling delegates that UK nations and the Republic of Ireland will always be family. The Scottish Government plans to hold an independence referendum in October next year.
It is 7:13. Lots of you getting in touch with us on a range of views this morning, from Liz Truss's charm offensive in terms of trying to get more of her own party on side with policy, and also energy bills and benefits.
Yeah, people not really that sympathetic to the uprating of benefits in line with inflation. Anna says, why should benefits rise more than wages? I work full-time and I earn just enough to be over the threshold to receive any help. I mean, that is a difficult position to be in when you're right on that threshold, isn't it? But I suppose the argument is that, you know, government should be helping people at the very bottom of society. 40% of people on benefits are in work of some form as well. But I take your point, that is a very difficult position to be in, right on that threshold there.
Yeah, Neil says if we bring unemployment in line with inflation, we may as well not work. Most low-paid workers are not paid in line with inflation. And Mark says, my wife and I have a nice house, but we are conscious about energy costs. We don't have gold-plated pensions like public sector workers So we turn the thermostat down.
Matthew on energy bills says, my wife and I live in a rented flat in a large block. We recently discovered that both the gas and electric meters do not correspond with our supply. We've been paying for someone else's energy. Everyone who lives in a block of flats should be checking if their meters correspond with the supply. Such good advice from you there, Matthew, because a lot of people will be thinking, you know, they're a bit powerless in those situations and really need to try and make sure they can put pressure on whoever's running that building for them.
Yeah, especially if you live in flats.
That's what he's saying, yeah.
Yeah, really good advice there. We're also talking about Ukraine this morning. John says, why is no one talking of peace, no attempts and no envoy? So, yeah, keep them coming in this morning. GB Views at gbnews.uk. You can drop us a tweet at GB News.
Now, we're going to talk about schools this morning. Food shortages and increasing prices are causing a deterioration in school meals for children.
The study by the local authority Caterers Association found almost all of the 99 school meal providers polled in England and Wales are experiencing supply problems, with prices rising by 30% since May.
Well, we're joined by the National Chair of the Local Authority Caterers Association, Brad Pearce, to give us more details. Very good morning to you. This becomes incredibly serious in the context of the number of children who only get their nutrition, their one nutritious meal a day, from their school. And if schools are struggling to provide food for their children, then we're in a real problem as a society, aren't we?
Well, what our survey shows us, and this is the second one we've done this year, it follows up from July, is that we asked our members what they were experiencing, and we've experienced shortages of some food ingredients for the last year, and that has continued from May to September when we questioned them again. And we also asked them about food inflation and food price increases, and they told us that since the beginning of the year, prices increased by 20% and have increased a further 30% between May and now. So that's putting a pressure on school caterers and schools who provide their own catering in terms of having to look very carefully at how we provide the nutritious meals that meet the school food standards. There's no question that meals are not meeting the school food standards currently, but members are saying that's coming at a cost, and how long can they continue to do that if an increasing funding doesn't come forward?
Where are they falling short? Which kind of standards, and how are they squaring that circle?
Well, the school food standards tell us exactly how we should be providing food and what we should provide on the plate each and every day across a 2, 3 or 4 week menu cycle. What members are saying is that they're having to swap out some ingredients. So, for example, they may look at swapping out some of the more expensive items and replacing with less expensive items. So, meat and fruit being swapped out for more lentils and more vegetables. Also using of jarred and frozen sauces rather than making sauces from scratch. So that's what we're doing at the moment. But what we need to do is move forward and say, to maintain this high quality nutritious lunch, which, as you said, in many cases the only hot meal that some children will receive, we have to see a change in funding levels, which are currently far too low.
But, I mean, yes, most people would say, absolutely, this needs to change. But as we've been reporting all through the morning, gosh, you know, this is a government that is trying to save money. We're also in a state of crisis with energy costs. And I know from my own children, the school where they go, the headmistress is extremely concerned about budgets, so much pressure on everything from classroom resources. This is just one of the other demands on government. How hopeful are you that this increase that you're looking for will come?
We're dealing with children's education, children's futures, and you know, this is an investment in our children. So we have to say to government, and we talk to the DfE regularly, we have to say to government, look, these are the facts. £2.41 for a universal infant free school meal, and £2.47 for a free school meal for older children. In the current climate, just doesn't cover the costs of food and labour that we need to produce it. We need to have an increase to cover the food costs going forward, and we need that index link going forward into future years.
Right, really good to get your time this morning. Thank you so much, Brad. Really appreciate it. Brad Pearce there, for the National Chair of the Local Authority Caterers Association.
So much pressure on resources at the moment, but when it comes to kids, let us know your views this morning. Now, after the break, we'll be going through the back pages. Paul Coit will be in the studio for that. We'll be talking about Arsenal's thrilling win over Liverpool. But first of all, your all-important Monday forecast. Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking early rain clearing the southeast with sunny spells following scattered showers in the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Well, a dry and locally chilly start to the day with plenty of sunshine, although a little cloud is possible at first in the east. Breezy, especially along northern coasts at first. Cloud and patchy rain will take most of the morning to fully clear, but dry and sunny conditions will follow from the north. Breezy around coastal areas with an isolated shower possible across North Wales, otherwise it will be dry with plenty of sunshine for all. A rather breezy day, especially towards the northwest where the odd isolated shower is possible during the morning, otherwise it will be dry with plenty of prolonged sunny spells for all. It will be a dry day but also rather breezy, especially over the hills and coasts, and there will be some patchy cloud but also plenty of prolonged sunny spells throughout the rest of the day. Rather windy, especially in the west, where local gales are possible at first. Scattered showers are also likely in the west, drier in the east with sunny spells for all. Windy with coastal gales possible at first. Showers are likely in the north, but drier elsewhere. Some cloud at times, but plenty of sunny spells are expected throughout the day. So showers and winds will ease in the northwest, but elsewhere remaining dry with sunny or clear spells into the evening. And that's how the weather is shaping up for your Monday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back at 7:23. Still to come on the programme this morning, we're talking about the positive effects that, wait for it,
plants can have on your mental health. And we're not saying you need to talk to a plant. We're just, well, maybe you can.
Maybe you
I
can.
don't know.
Yeah,
maybe,
it's good for the plant.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what
Might be
kind
good
of
for you.
plants
Yeah.
as well. GBViews at gbnews.uk. If you do have plants at home, what kind of plants?
Plus, we're talking true crime, Netflix drama Dahmer, about the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer is breaking streaming records, and Channel 5's Maxine about the Soham murder co-conspirator Maxine Carr. That premieres tonight. Why are we all so obsessed with true crime? I love it. Do you love it? Let us know your thoughts. We're talking about that a little bit later on with a forensic psychiatrist at 8:45.
Remember, GBViews at gbnews.uk or at gbnews if you want to get in touch with us this morning. Lots of you are. We're enjoying your input, so do join us as Paul Coit does right now.
Yes, the warmest welcome.
Talk about
Thank you.
To you, Paul.
Thank you so much.
Always lovely to see you and for you to enlighten us about the sport.
Well, I
especially the
feel that's
football.
what I'm here for.
Please do.
Arsenal, I've got to tell you, see, the thing is, any proper sports journalist or anybody who talks about this for their living would be completely on the fence and be, very unbiased about a situation. But I've got to tell you, you know me well enough that I'm very uncomfortable about Arsenal doing well at the moment. They are doing extremely well. They're top of the league and managed to beat Liverpool 3-2 yesterday. And again, completely non-biased, but they got one dodgy penalty and should have had one given to Liverpool as well. Did that sound slightly biased as a Spurs fan saying that?
Yeah, a little bit.
I'm a bit worried that maybe it did.
But also, Cristiano Ronaldo got his 700th club goal.
He did. He got his 700th club goal playing for Manchester United. He is a machine. Still manages to keep going at the age of 56, and he's still playing, and he's still looking amazing.
I mean, he does look... I mean, and this isn't particularly sports insight.
It is.
He doesn't look any different from when he started.
But it is a sports insight because the thing is that the way he trains, the way he looks after himself, that is how he's managing to keep going. He played in the 1952 FA Cup final, but still he manages... I don't know how he does it.
He only has one KFC a week.
Only one. But that's the thing. When you've got truly great players, they dedicate themselves, and it's the same as any sport as well, and great athletes, they dedicate themselves to the sport. And that's what he's done.
And was he 37?
37.
37. Will he get to 1,000 goals, do you think?
Well, it all depends what level it is, but with Manchester United, see, I still think he's got a role to play regularly for Manchester United, and Eric Ten Hag brought him off the bench, scored his 700th. He's still got it. The guy's still got it. You lose yards. OK, you're not probably as quick as you are as when you were 25, but the thing is, I've spoken to so many old players as well over the years, and they still have the talent there. They can still spin the ball on their foot. They could still kick the ball in the top corner of a goal without any worry. It's just fitness and speed. So as long as he's got that, the talent isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, 5 yards in your head.
5 yards. That's what Teddy Sheringham used to do.
I just think of the video of Bex trying to get a football into was it a Diet Coke can, knocking a Coke can down, and it was the precision.
It is, and you know what? He'd still be able to do that. That's the thing.
Exactly.
He just wouldn't be very quick running up to the ball to actually kick it.
Probably still quicker than us.
That's what it's about.
Right, West Ham, how did they get on?
West Ham beat Fulham 3-1, so a good result for them. Fulham were 1-0 up there at the London Stadium, and also Crystal Palace 2, Leeds United 1. But finally, to end on Arsenal, and I gave them a bit of a hard time there, and I'm kidding, but they are looking very good. And Mikel Arteta, what Arsenal have done very well is that they probably would have fired him had he been the manager, in my opinion, that took over from Arsene Wenger. But it wasn't Unai Emery. It didn't work out for him. But they backed him. And that's the difference, is that so many managers, they get fired so quickly when they say, we're going to give them time. They've given him time, and it's borne fruit, and therefore it should be good for other clubs to look at as well.
I wonder if Liz Truss is an Arsenal fan.
You know what I wonder.
Does it
Liz
work
Truss,
that way? Mikel Arteta,
give them time.
Give them time. Back the manager.
We'll see.
Back the manager.
I like that analogy. Shall we talk cricket?
Let's do that.
England captain Jos Buttler, who's been very diplomatic.
He has been extremely diplomatic. We've got the World T20, the World Cup coming up at the end of the week. So England are in Australia. They've got a 3-series T20 game, 20 overs aside, playing against Australia yesterday. Now, this was a really... Now, have a look at
what's going on
here.
here?
There's a bit of
That's not
going
cricket.
on there.
That's not cricket, is it?
That's Matthew Wade there on the left, the Australian batsman. We've got Mark Wood, our bowler. Now, Mark runs up, bowls to Matthew Wade, who hits the ball, skies it. So, as Wood runs towards the ball, it should be an easy catch. Then you've got Wade, and what he does, and excuse me for manhandling you, Paul, as I do this, puts his hand across his chest, stops Wood from catching the ball. So normally, under the rules of cricket, they could appeal. They could appeal, and then Wade would be out. But Jos Buttler, who's the England captain, is thinking, right, we've got the World Cup here in Australia, we're playing against the Australians, maybe this isn't the right time to appeal a controversial decision because the crowd will probably go against us. But let's not forget anything here. The Australian fans hate England. So are they going to just hate us even more when they're playing?
They do.
But anyway, luckily we won by 8 runs and we managed to...
They're definitely going to hate us then, even more.
They're really going to love us for that one, aren't
What's going on Twitter? This former Real Madrid goalkeeper, Iker Casillas.
All right. Now, this really is a strange one. Iker Casillas, legendary Real Madrid and ex-Spanish goalkeeper. So he tweets yesterday So there he is.
Yeah, I remember seeing this tweet.
He came out, did he?
Well, he
And then
did.
he went back in.
Well, he was in, out, and really shake it all about. I hope you respect me, I'm gay. He puts it on Twitter. So, obviously, there's not been such a high-profile footballer that's come out as gay, which is, people would think this is a fantastic
On the
thing.
eve of the World Cup, with highlight
this is a
of all of
fantastic
these things,
thing.
yeah.
So then Carlos Puyol, who played alongside him, another Spanish legend, says it's time to tell our story, and then puts a picture of them together. So now
everyone's going, what? What's going on there?
Is this, this is why now, and it's incredible that he's actually decided to make this decision. But then it turns out, oh no, it was a joke. So how much of it was a joke? Casillas says it's that old one, oh, my account was hacked. So how someone managed to hack his account, I don't know. He's put apologies to all my followers and, of course, more apologies to the LGBT community, because he's seen the reaction to making such a joke and because it's something you shouldn't be joking about in football at the moment. The amount of bad,
especially with the World Cup in Qatar.
Of course. I mean, how stupid to do such a thing. So then Puyol has then tweeted, sorry for such a clumsy joke, no bad intentions, totally out of place. So from someone coming out, which was going to be one of the biggest stories in football, and a huge story as well, they were back in as soon as they were out and said it was a joke. So, yeah, pretty stupid thing to do, but there you go. So that's where that story ended. So it was huge, and now it's all brushed under the carpet.
Well, he'd like it to be brushed under the carpet.
Well,
I think there'll be a bit
I'm
of a
sure
backlash
he
to
would,
all of that.
but I think, you can't be doing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Thank you very much. Yes.
We'll make a sports person out of you.
You will. You'll try. You're determined.
Trying my best.
Stay with us. After the break, we'll go through the papers one more time this morning. Tessie Ojo, Nigel Nelson with us for that. See you in a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens,
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It is 7:33. Good to have you with us this morning. Let's bring you up to date with what is happening.
The Conservative MP for Chelsea and Fulham's been elected as the new International Trade Minister. Greg Hands replaces MP Conor Burns, who was sacked last week following allegations of misconduct. The new Secretary of State, who's an ally of Rishi Sunak, tweeted the appointment had been an honour and a privilege.
Nearly a quarter of mental health patients are waiting more than 12 weeks to start treatment, with many turning to A&E. Data from the Royal College of Psychiatrists found 43% said the waits for treatment led to their mental health getting worse.
And we'll be talking about World Mental Health Day after the papers. England captain Harry Kane will become the latest celebrity to appear on CBeebies Bedtime Stories. The Tottenham striker will read The Lion Inside, all about overcoming fear and finding your inner lion through self-belief. Harry's episode will coincide, as we've been saying, with World Mental Health Day today.
Let's go through the papers then with Tessie Ojo and Nigel Nelson. Morning to both of you.
Morning.
Tessie, let's start with the front page of the Telegraph. Just a horrible story about that blast in Ireland and the little girl who was going to buy a cake when...
I mean, it's just so sad, incredibly sad. This little girl, it was her mother's birthday, decided to go and do something great for her mother, like buy cake, and got caught up in this blast. You know, what makes me really sad about this story is only last week we saw the shooting in Thailand where in a nursery, in a daycare centre with a good number of young people or children were killed. And I just think there's just so much agony in our world right now. And today is World Mental Health Day, and it just makes you think about how are we looking after ourselves. There's just one thing after another, and I always advocate for people to step away from the news sometimes, because sometimes it gets too much. You need to protect yourself. But it just makes you think about, for those people in Ireland right now, how are we going to look after them? What's the grieving process? How do we help them cope with this for, beyond this week, beyond when this is no longer headline news? How do we support communities to get over something like this? It's just sad.
Yeah, it's a really important point, isn't it? Is so often after these sorts of tragedies, the cameras pack up and go away, the eyes of the world go away. Well, life carries on, but there are people whose lives have just fallen apart there.
Absolutely.
And they do need support.
Absolutely.
Nigel, shall we turn to politics? It's the SNP conference closing today in Aberdeen. Nicola Sturgeon saying it's a good conference if the only headlines coming out of it are about her views on the Tories. But it's making front pages. It's on the front of the Telegraph this morning, and you've got a version of it in The Sun about how she detests Liz Truss's government.
Yeah, well, detest Tories is the way she puts it. And the suggestion is that she would be prepared to do a coalition with Keir Starmer after a general election. I think she's whistling in the wind a bit with all the recent polls. I mean, the GB News poll had Keir Starmer 30 points ahead. We've had regular polls of 20 points ahead. I mean, if you put them all together, what it means is that the Tories would be left with a kind of rump of 85 seats, with Labour getting about 471. So there's no need for a coalition. The last thing that Keir Starmer would need to do was be propped up by the SNP. So I think she's being a bit too hopeful there. The Tories quite like the idea of suggesting there will be this kind of, I think it was described by them yesterday as a monstrous coalition between the two.
Ah, right. Not a coalition of chaos.
Not a coalition of chaos, it's just monstrous.
Coalition.
This is monstrous, yeah. But I mean, at the moment, unlikely to happen. In the event that we really do get an election soon, Labour is going to walk it.
Yeah, and do you think I detest the Tories? Do you think that that's divisive remark to make? She did backtrack on that later on last night, saying that she was talking about the policies and not necessarily the people.
Yeah,
do you think it's divisive?
I do.
Or are people being a bit of a snowflake?
No, I think it is divisive. I mean, the whole thing is that she's right. What she's talking about, or what she should be talking about, is detesting policies, not people. It was rather like last year, Angela Rayner being overheard calling them Tory scum, which she subsequently apologised for. Don't attack them as people, attack them for what they do. And it works for both sides.
Her personal approval ratings are not particularly high, are they, at the moment, for Nicola Sturgeon? She's being booed when she was in Dunfermline with the King last week, and yet she has had successes with the SNP. Landslides, she would describe them as, with this mandate for going for another independence referendum. That will be decided in the Supreme Court this week, whether or not that will go ahead next year. How do we have this weird situation whereby she's not very popular and yet the SNP seem to be doing quite well in Scotland?
Yes, certainly electorally, that the SNP are doing well. I wonder if it's a bit got to do with the Queen dying, a kind of feeling by a lot of Scots. It was actually, I thought it was quite touching to see the way that Scotland turned out for the Queen.
Yes.
And it may be there's a bit of that, it doesn't mean that independence is not popular. I would have to see from a referendum, actually, how popular it turns out to be. My own view is they have every right to have a referendum because circumstances have changed since Brexit.
Yeah. Moving on, Tessie, you picked out page 13 of the Times. Most of us don't really like Mondays.
I'm sure you jumped out of
it.
I jumped out of bed at 3 o'clock this morning to be with you. I think there's just something here that really caught my attention. And again, we're still talking about mental health. This report says that over 74% of people, particularly the 18 to 24s, have that sense of anxiety all through Sunday, thinking about work and to-do lists and all of that. And what really caught me is this 18 to 24 are still those young people, largely who are probably coming into work for the first time, who were the COVID generation, who probably sat their final exams at university or A-levels or whatever at home. And from the last 2 years, charities like mine have been campaigning about the impact of mental health, the impact of the pandemic on young people. It does not surprise me that this same demography are going into the workplace and are anxious because we're still not treating this. We're not talking about it. We might have moved on as society from the pandemic or the health challenges that the pandemic presented at the time. What we haven't addressed is the long-term impact on the mental health of young people.
Look, do you think there is a sense, though, that the younger generation perhaps are a little bit too soft? I mean, a lot of people will say, my father's generation, he probably didn't look forward to going to work on a Monday morning, he just got on with it. Is it a new thing, the Sunday scaries, as it's being described?
I'm not sure it is. I mean, this is based on a recent survey the Department of Health did to come up with the actual new figures. So 65% of us on a Sunday, about 5 o'clock, apparently it about hits where we start worrying about the following week. I don't think that's new. I think that people have always sort of been worried about the week ahead, worried about Mondays. The question, I think, as Tessie says, is what you do about it.
Yeah.
And the important thing is there are a whole load of sort of things that can make it better. And the government have put up a website where you can get tailored advice. If you're suffering from it, you can actually find out ways that you can minimise the effect.
Yeah, we'll be talking to a government minister about that later on.
I also do think that employers have a duty of care to be more attentive to that, and I'm interested to know how many employers are actually doing anything about it.
Yeah, instead of talking about it.
And I was reading a statistic. Sajid Javid lost his brother to suicide, and he's written in the Telegraph today, someone dies from suicide in the UK every 90 minutes. 5,000 suicides in 2021 in England alone. 3/4 of suicides are men, which is all, linked into all of this mental health issue. Where are we now? Nigel, do you want to talk about robot recruiters with a blind spot for glasses? That's in the Telegraph.
I do.
Tell me more.
Yes. This is an analysis by Cambridge University, and it's looking at recruiters who use artificial intelligence and algorithms to decide who's to be recruited.
Oh, right. I was thinking it was recruiting robots.
No, not recruiting robots. This is robots recruiting people like us. And so what they've discovered is that the algorithm starts discriminating against things like people who wear glasses. So that's me gone for a new job. If you end up behind just a blank wall when you're being... These are video kind of recruitments. They don't like that either. So what the Telegraph has come up with is how to beat AI software. So swap glasses for contacts, OK. Wear a headscarf if you want to appear less neurotic. I'm not sure that would work for me somehow. It just doesn't seem to go there. Sit in front of a bookcase. Tick, I could probably do that.
I mean, everyone does that. It's such a cliche.
If you've got a bookcase.
Yeah, well, you can always import one. Yes, we'll get the wallpaper.
Get the green screens, can't you? Yeah.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
And then the final thing is to put some artwork on a bare wall or whatever. But again, if you're doing a video kind of call, I think you do that anyway, don't you?
Yeah, you are meant to. Interesting. Yeah. Tessie, also. Page 21 of the Eye, you want us to talk about the revealing power of shopping lists.
I found this story really interesting because it talked about actually looking at a person's shopping list gives you an insight into their class, who they are, what they do. which is really...
If they do make shopping lists, even.
Interestingly, this article talked about people were also moving away from the paper-based shopping list to doing it on their phones. Yeah. And it was just saying, what does your shopping list say about you? And it reminded me of, actually, I still do a shopping list. I get my children to put in what they need for the week. And actually, a couple of weekends ago, I did a post about, on my shopping list, my son said something like, air freshener or something like that. And I got to the shop and I realised I wasn't sure if he meant for the room, for the bathroom, and I just bought all of it. And I got back, and I think I got back and I did a post on Instagram that says, this is everything I bought, because he wrote one word that I couldn't understand which of them he needed. And it was just one of those funny things that says, actually, in the cost of living crisis, should we be more careful how we shop?
How nice did your house smell?
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Oh, perfect.
Amazing.
And your bathroom as well, I presume.
100%.
Do you guys have lists when you go?
I was just thinking, I made one yesterday on my phone, but I don't think it would say much about me other than I think we needed milk, loo roll. Nothing exciting.
I do lists. I find lists actually make life much easier, whatever it might be. So work lists and stuff like that, and feel a real sense of achievement just ticking them all off.
It's enjoyable.
And do you put them in order of where the things are in the supermarket?
Oh, no.
So you can navigate your route.
No.
Instead of going backwards and forwards all over.
You do that.
I might do. I might route it on a map.
I think you might need help.
No. You have got to be kidding me.
You don't want to be going all the way. These supermarkets are enormous, and you don't want to be going all the way over
They
to one side.
change where they are all the
and then
time. How do you know where everything is?
Not that often.
But I kind of know where everything is in my local supermarket, so I can navigate that easily without a map.
Yeah.
Maybe that, So I kind of get what you're saying. Yeah.
I'm also a big fan of the self-scan. Do you do that?
I love that.
I like that. Yeah, that's great fun.
Yeah, that's always good.
Yeah.
How are we doing for time? What are we... Have we got... we've got to move on. We've got to leave it there. We'll have more from Nigel and Tessie in the next hour. Thank you both very much indeed. But with the time at 7:46, let's bring you up to date with the latest headlines.
Several explosions have hit the centre of Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. It's after Russia's President Putin accused Ukraine of the Kerch Bridge bombing. He called it an act of terror. The bridge connects occupied Crimea and Russia and was damaged by a truck explosion at the weekend.
Vigils have been held across County Donegal in memory of the 10 people killed in a petrol station explosion. 8 other people were injured in the blast in the village of Creesler on Friday. Irish authorities say the incident's being treated as a tragic accident. Their investigations are ongoing.
As we've been talking about this morning, Scotland's First Minister is expected to announce a further bid for independence. Nicola Sturgeon will close the SNP conference in Aberdeen today, telling delegates that UK nations and the Republic of Ireland will always be family.
Now, today is World Mental Health Day, and new data shows that more than half of us think plants, and getting involved in gardening has helped to improve our moods over the past 2 years.
And even though winter is on its way, gardener Michael Perry says now is the perfect time to begin planting wildflowers. Morning to you, Michael. Is that right?
Morning.
You should be out planting wildflowers now.
Absolutely. A lot of people don't realise that autumn is the best season for gardening, because a lot of us think, oh, it gets to Easter, kind of May time. We then go out, we plant everything. It's kind of harder work because you have to water in, it's a lot warmer. Actually, planting a lot of things in the autumn gets you ahead. So sowing wildflower seeds, planting bulbs, planting bare root plants as well. And of course, putting down mulch, kind of preparing everything for the season after. And you can do it at your own pace as well this time of year.
You're obviously known on social media as Mr. Plant Geek, and you've got a huge following. How helpful has being green-fingered been for your own mental health? And how much are you hearing people saying they're turning to it as a kind of tool to help them with mental health problems?
Yeah, definitely. Really good question. Because for me, I call myself Mr. Plant Geek these days, but there was a time when I was at school and I was a geek. And it wasn't cool to be a geek in those days. And so I was really ashamed of being in love with plants. And so it was kind of like a nice refuge for me. And so I grew up with plants and they were always by my side. And I think people are now seeing this. And especially during the pandemic, people were starting to really get into houseplants, for example, because they see the mental health benefits. It's like having something to care for. It's like having a pet in the home. that plant is depending on you, and that kind of means something. Not to mention, the air purification benefits, the fact that it softens a lot of the decor inside, and it's fun, and you can see on Instagram it's become very collectible. People have got, generally an average of about 50 houseplants these days.
Yeah, I know what you mean about that relationship with a plant. We've got a little basil pot at home, and it gets all droopy and sad after a while. Then you put some little water in it, and then it perks up, and it
perks you up.
Perks me up because it's perked up, which is weird. Michael, what's going on with the plants behind you? Are there any plants in particular that you would recommend for keeping at home to improve your mental
I can see a cheese plant, am I right?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, just over, where is it? Over there.
There it is, get that shoulder,
This is a kind of baby one as well. When it gets a bit bigger, it'll have a lot more holes in the leaves because that's how it lets light in. Brilliant for beginners as well because, with my job, I travel quite a lot. So the houseplants I have here, they kind of have to look after themselves a little bit. So you've got cheese plant, you've got big succulents here. Over here, I've got a parlour palm. Really nice to have bigger plants as well because they look after themselves a bit more because they don't dry out as quickly. So yeah, it's great to start for beginners or cacti, succulents, because at this time of year, they won't need any water at all. So that is perfect for a beginner, someone that forgets to water their plants or, actually the main reason people go wrong with houseplants is they overwater them. So you can always revive a plant that's underwatered than one that's overwatered. And always water it yourself. Don't share the task with your partner, your flatmate, your housemate. Just you're the only one that waters. That's the way you can get it right.
You're so right. This is what happens in my house.
Yeah.
My husband will say, I've just watered that. And I'll be like, I just watered it. It's going to drown. Don't do that.
Just one person, once a week,
person.
an alarm on your phone. You then know you're going to go around and assess what needs watering. If something doesn't need watering, don't water it. But just once a week, just do that eyeball around the house.
And gardening, I suppose, doesn't have to be in the house. It doesn't have to be in the garden. A lot of people don't have gardens. You can also do guerrilla gardening. There's been a whole movement, hasn't there, sort of guerrilla planting of wildflowers, chucking these wildflower bombs out the window and roundabouts or wherever it might be. That's got to give you a little bit of a boost.
Oh, absolutely. And you can make up your own seed balls at home with a little bit of clay, put the seeds inside, mix in a bit of cayenne pepper, then the predators don't then go and eat the seed. But yeah, you can spread those all around. I mean, people can also grow wildflowers in a window box at home. So, people might be listening to this and thinking, oh, I haven't got an outdoor space. But actually, even if you haven't got a balcony, you could probably fix up a window box, sow that with wildflower seeds, and then you've got this almost meadow outside your window. So you're getting those outdoor flower benefits as well. And it's a good idea to grow more wildflowers, which are good for pollinators. If you're growing your own veg, you're going to have more pollinators in your garden and get better veg crops as well. So it's not good for the environment, it's good for you as well.
Yeah, you've inspired us this morning. You really have. So we're going to take lots of that advice.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I hope that you've helped some people at home as well on this World Mental Health Day. If they've got any blue feelings, to turn them green instead. Thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah, let's bring in Kerry Nixon, who's a consultant forensic psychologist. Morning to you, Kerry. Just obviously we're talking about plants, and that's one way that we can improve our mental health by tending to our plants at home. But just to explain for us why it is so important to think about these things on World Mental Health Day.
Well, in Western culture, we've actually seen a huge increase in negative mental health over the last 10 years. And actually, one of the things is that we don't spend enough time doing the simple things in life anymore. So that's why, planting or walking the dog, getting fresh air, we don't do enough of that. We work longer hours in the West now. We don't have that break from work. We have our mobile phones, our laptops. So there isn't a break. We have social media. Our lives are so busy now. And I think that's what we get wrong in the West, is that we're too busy doing things rather than just taking time out to do simple things in life.
And we're getting it really wrong when you look at the statistics. I mean, this stopped me in my tracks this morning. Someone dies from suicide in the UK every 90 minutes. 5,000 of those deaths were in England alone in 2021, and 3/4 of these suicides are men.
Yeah, and I see this. I run a clinic, and I've seen a huge increase in mental health issues, a huge increase in mental health issues with men and young people as well. It's really alarming, the number of young people who are suicidal, and that increased in lockdown. Absolutely, there was a negative impact of lockdown, but we're seeing huge increases and a huge amount of serious mental health conditions as well. I mean, I went from working in a hospital in acute mental health setting, and one thing that shocks me is that in the general population, I'm seeing really serious mental health issues day in, day out.
Yeah, how much is the cost of living crisis contributing to those mental health issues?
Hugely. Poverty is such a risk factor for mental health issues. You know, people are taking second jobs, so that leads to burnout and exhaustion. I think burnout is something that none of us talk about enough. I see the results of burnout all the time in my clinic. People are worried. How are they going to afford things? They're worried about, feeding their children. This is going to have... I really am concerned about what's coming in the next few months in terms of mental health. It's only going to get worse.
I was going to say, so what would you say to the government? Because they're announcing this help today, and we're going to be talking to a government minister in the next hour, £122 million for mental health support. On top of that, what else would you say that the government could do?
To be honest, don't get me started on mental health provision. It is awful. It's awful. I run a private practice, but not everybody can afford to see a private psychologist. And I have people coming into me who have tried and tried to get mental health support. And they get, the GPs do all they can, but they offer medication, but they don't get the one-to-one, face-to-face help that they need from a psychologist or a counsellor. So it's just not working. There's huge, huge gaps in mental health support.
So is the money enough that the government will often champion?
No, it's not. The mental health support needs a complete revamp. It needs somebody to go in and completely revamp it, look at the gaps and change the whole system.
Well, Kerry Nixon, you put a very powerful case. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us this morning on GB News. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Pretty stark hearing all of that, isn't it? If you are suffering from mental health problems, let us know your views on all of this. World Mental Health Day today, and perhaps some of those gardening tips as well, whether or not you've been using those or putting those into practice. Stay with us. Coming up, another poll shows Labour is on track for a huge majority. We'll be talking to the pollster Chris Curtis and hear his thoughts on that.
After the weather.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking... Early rain clearing the southeast with sunny spells following scattered showers in the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Well, a dry and locally chilly start to the day with plenty of sunshine, although a little cloud is possible at first in the east. Breezy, especially along northern coasts at first. Cloud and patchy rain will take most of the morning to fully clear, but dry and sunny conditions will follow from the north. Breezy around coastal areas with an isolated shower possible across North Wales. Otherwise, it will be dry with plenty of sunshine for all. A rather breezy day, especially towards the northwest, where the odd isolated shower is possible during the morning. Otherwise, it will be dry with plenty of prolonged sunny spells for all. It will be a dry day, but also rather breezy, especially over the hills and coasts. And there will be some patchy cloud, but also plenty of prolonged sunny spells throughout the rest of the day. Rather windy, especially in the west, where local gales are possible at first. Scattered showers are also likely in the west, drier in the east with sunny spells for all. Windy with coastal gales possible at first. Showers are likely in the north, but drier elsewhere. Some cloud at times, but plenty of sunny spells are expected throughout the day. So showers and winds will ease in the northwest, but elsewhere remaining dry with sunny or clear spells into the evening. And that's how the weather is shaping up for your Monday.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
The PM faces another big U-turn as Tory rebels warn of a backlash against her benefits cuts plan.
Good morning. It is 8 o'clock on Monday, the 10th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Paul Hawkins.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Cabinet ministers have urged Conservative MPs to reunite after another week of infighting. Dozens of backbenchers warn they'll rebel against benefits rising in line with earnings rather than September's inflation figures.
Large explosions have been heard in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, this morning following the sound of missiles. The city's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, says the explosions took place in the Shevchensky district of the city.
It's World Mental Health Day today, with one in four of us reportedly struggling every year. As the government prepare to announce a £122 million support package for workers, we'll be discovering the best ways to try and help and improve your mental well-being.
And a slim down ceremony for a slim down monarchy. We'll have more details about King Charles's coronation expected to take place next summer.
And as always, we love you to be part of the conversation. Get in touch with your thoughts, your views, your experiences this morning. gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. So our top story this morning, and Cabinet ministers, including Suella Braverman and Penny Mordaunt, have pleaded for the Conservative Party to show loyalty to the Prime Minister.
It comes as another big U-turn is reportedly on the cards, with several Tory MPs warning the government they would lose a vote on a real-term cut to benefits.
Well, joining us now for the latest on how Liz Truss is polling, let's go to the head of political polling at Opinion Research, Chris Curtis, regular to the show. Good morning to you, Chris. Look, how significant or insignificant would be pursuing this benefits cut, real terms cut, if Liz Truss decides not to U-turn? Or how important is it, should I say, to her polling to perform a U-turn here?
Well, I'm not sure it's particularly important, and that's not because it's a popular measure. Maybe 10 years ago we were seeing people thinking that welfare should be cut. That certainly isn't true anymore. But I just don't think it's as unpopular as a lot of the other things that Liz Truss has been putting in place recently, and I think they're a lot more about, and they're what's driving down voting intention numbers a lot more. So it is the fact that the market reacted so badly to her mini budget a few months ago, and the fact that she was trying to cut taxes for the very richest people in the country. They're the things that were really driving down support for her. So this is probably unpopular, but is it the main driver of voters away from the Conservatives right now? I don't think so.
What is?
It's cutting taxes. It's the view of cutting taxes for rich people, and it is that the Conservatives win elections when they're viewed as economically competent, as opposed to a Labour Party which is viewed as nice, caring about public services, but perhaps not as good on the economy. After that mini budget, the response that we got from voters in terms of the policies and the response we saw from the market has convinced enough people out there that the Conservatives are no longer best at running the economy. And that's one of the reasons why we've seen such a dramatic shift in the polls over the past couple of weeks.
But you're an expert on public opinion. Do you think this is salvageable, given that they did a U-turn on the 45p, given that they have said they're going to bring forward that November the 23rd deadline for printing the medium growth plan? Do you think that there is still time to change opinion?
Never say never, I think, is fair. And we do live in incredibly sort of volatile times in politics. Public opinion moves a lot more dramatically than it would have done 10, 20 years ago, which is one of the reasons why we've seen such a dramatic shift away from Liz Truss. Having said that, we really shouldn't underestimate how bad these numbers are for the government. Nobody has ever really come back from polling numbers quite this bad before. I think things will be very difficult for Liz Truss, particularly given, she's lost the trust of the public. People no longer think that she's principled and competent and a strong leader. And usually when you see numbers like that, her numbers now are worse than Boris Johnson's were at Boris Johnson's worst point. They're worse than Jeremy Corbyn's were at Jeremy Corbyn's worst point. Usually when somebody reaches that point, it's very unlikely that they come back from it, but never say never.
OK, Chris, can we talk about the SNP conference coming to a close today in Aberdeen? Nicola Sturgeon making her closing speech, addressing them there. What are the public's attitudes to independence? Where are we at the moment? It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, as though you've pretty much got two entrenched views that kind of float around 50-50 thereabouts, and they don't tend to change that much. So what would be the point, I suppose, if that's the case, of another independence referendum?
Yeah, I think that's true. And what I'd add to that is that in most polls, even over the past few years, we have seen no slightly ahead of yes on that independence question. So I still think it would be, if there were a referendum in the short term, it's still probably more likely that Scotland would vote to stay rather than leave. And yeah, as you say, it's these really entrenched views. It's the fact that it's still the biggest dividing line in politics. It still means that when most people vote in Scottish Parliament elections, they're not thinking about how well the Scottish NHS is being running or how well Scottish schools are doing. They're thinking about independence, which is one of the reasons why the SNP continues to do so well in those Scottish elections. But what I would say about sort of independence in the medium term is what we are seeing in the data is a lot of young people who are sort of turning to the age of 18, are a lot more likely to be supporting independence. So while we haven't seen a sort of dramatic shift towards independence over the past few years, I still think if this generational effect happens of younger people becoming old enough to vote and still strongly supporting independence, I think actually, in the medium term, we could see a Scottish population that does want Scotland to break away from the UK.
Really interesting stuff. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Chris. Chris Curtis there from Opinion Research. Of course, before the public get to have their say.
Yes.
The lawyers and the judges will have their say at the Supreme Court.
Yeah, you're going to be covering that, aren't you, for GB News, heading to the Supreme Court for us tomorrow and the following day. But meanwhile, we've sent Darren McCaffrey up to Aberdeen. He's covering the SNP conference, their final day. It's been an interesting conference. Nicola Sturgeon making headlines for saying she detests the Tories. Very unhelpful language.
Yeah, there has been an awful lot of criticism. In many ways, Nicola Sturgeon's argument about this is, should it come as any surprise that she's not a big fan of the Conservative Party or indeed the policies? She's been pretty clear about that for the last couple of decades. Others criticised the language used in all of this. She did have to clarify her remarks yesterday, saying that this was referring to the policies of the Conservative Party rather than the actual members or people who voted for the Conservatives. But ultimately, in the end, this conference actually, in many ways, hasn't had really anything to say new on that issue of Scotland's place within the UK on independence, even though it is the issue that has, again, unsurprisingly dominated this conference. We know that Nicola Sturgeon is going down that legal route of the Supreme Court. They're going to stop their proceedings tomorrow, though that's going to take at least a couple of months. The SNP's argument is that it should be up to the Scottish Parliament, to MSPs, to decide when the next referendum, or if there should be a referendum on Scottish independence, should be. Nicola Sturgeon wants it to be in October of next year. Westminster government says, no, it's us who decide that, and no, it's not going to happen. So what is plan B? Well, Nicola Sturgeon over the summer set that out as that she'd like to use the Westminster election next year, or the year after next, I should say, in 2024, as a de facto referendum. Though many would say a general election, frankly, is never going to be a de facto referendum. So that's not really going to work either. And that's the problem, I think, for the SNP, is that at every kind of corner they come up against this kind of opposition, these kind of constitutional blocks to it. And there is big questions about what or where they could go next. And all this, of course, while lots of voters here in Scotland saying actually the SNP should not be focusing on independence at all. We've got a cost of living crisis, we've got an energy security crisis, and that the Scottish Government should be focused a lot more on that. And I think Nicola Sturgeon, in her speech later on today, is kind of going to focus a lot more on the Conservatives' rule down south, on the economy, on the cost of living crisis, and of course on renewable energy here in Scotland, which they argue is the future for Scottish energy security, is building those wind farms, and that is where their argument will be held and purported a little later on this afternoon.
It'll be interesting to see what she has to say. Thank you very much, Darren. That's our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, at the final day of the SNP conference in Aberdeen.
Yeah, keep your thoughts coming in at home. Let us know what you think about Nicola Sturgeon saying she detests the Tories and all they stand for. Lots of you getting in touch on GB Views this morning, I should say. We were talking about shopping lists, whether or not you make one, what it says about you. You actually like to do one in order of where you're likely to go within the shop, which is a new level of geekery that I've never encountered, but I admire it. I do. I respect it. What does Wendy think about it?
She says, I'm with you, Paul. I always do my shopping list by aisle. There's nothing worse than getting almost to the till, and then you have to go halfway back across the shop for something. I would say I try to organise it geographically according to the store, but then my memory is so bad, I've actually forgotten to put something on the list. So I have to go back across the store.
Oh, dear. So you didn't even have bothered.
Middle-class problem.
Jackie says, years ago, before we retired, I gave my husband a shopping list which included Jif for the pancakes. He bought Jif the cream cleaner. I had to go shopping again. I don't know what sort of Jif you mean. Oh, do you mean the lemon? Jif lemon, it must be.
Yeah, it must be.
Yeah, there you go. I was thinking, what other Jif is there besides the cleaning product? And Kerry says, I write my shopping list in order of where each item is, so I'm not walking around the supermarket wasting valuable time. Seems you're not alone in this, Paul.
True.
I've been educated.
If I just had a decent memory, it'd actually work. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Right, let's talk all things royal now. It's been over a month since the Queen's death, and new details have emerged about the King's coronation.
Yeah, in what's being called Operation Golden Orb, the new monarch will reportedly favour a slimmed-down ceremony with fewer rituals. Royal broadcaster and historian Rafe Heidel-Manku joins us for more. Good morning to you, Ray.
Good morning.
So, how much of a slimmed-down ceremony is this going to be?
Well, you know, the coronation ceremony is one of our great contributions, I think, to civilization. You know, it's up there, as far as I'm concerned, with the works of Shakespeare and with, you know, Turner's paintings. It's such an exquisite ceremony. Normally, for the Queen's coronation in '53, which was based upon those of her father and grandfather, George V and George VI, it was around 3.5 hours. Now, we're told that the current plan is to have a coronation ceremony of only around an hour or so.
Are you outraged?
Well, you know, let me just put it this way. We list our heritage buildings. We have Grade 1 listing for the Houses of Parliament. I think the coronation ceremony deserves Grade 1 listing. I used to be a friend of the Maharaja of Drangadra, a wonderfully erudite old Indian prince, the last man to rule his kingdom before independence. Wow. And he was a very erudite man, scholar in Hindu stuff and Judaism and Christianity. And one of the plans here is, of course, to make the coronation service more diverse, more representative of modern Britain. But he wrote to me in 2010, and I just want to quote what he said. He said, "If the coronation ceremony in its traditional form and all its glory is abandoned, I shall mourn its loss as an exquisite part of our world heritage. It would be like the wanton destruction of a national or indeed a world monument, say Stonehenge or the Taj Mahal. And that's someone who's a Hindu prince, not somebody who's British or Anglican.
Yeah.
There is a beauty to that coronation service. We're the only people in Europe to actually crown our kings. Nobody else actually places the crown on the head or has the anointing. It's a very important tradition and an important ceremony, and I'm just slightly wary of these attempts to try to make everything seem to be relevant to the modern age. Some things actually are timeless.
Do you not think that the king is mindful of all of that as well, though? I mean, he's not somebody who wants to take a sledgehammer to the monarchy. He just wants to be respectful of the mood of the nation who are struggling to heat or eat in their homes. He doesn't want to be parading his wealth in a way that, you know, is perhaps unnecessary. At the same time, he will want to make sure that the crown gets the coverage and admiration and pomp that it deserves.
It's certainly not my place to criticise His Majesty, and I would never want to criticise His Majesty. But my comments are merely sort of suggestions for his advisors, perhaps, to take on board at these early stages. But you know what? It's at times of gloom and doom that we actually need these sorts of occasions to unite the nation. We saw that with the wedding of the Queen in 1947, just after the war. We saw that with her coronation. They galvanised the nation together, and I think this coronation could actually serve to much that end. And of course, who are the critics? The Owen Joneses of this world are a minority, actually. I think people overestimate the criticism that will be there. The great unsung people of Britain, I think, would love this.
Yeah, I guess for King Charles, it's about reaffirming and establishing that really solid connection with the people that his mum had. And so in doing that, would you say that that connection is more important than the pomp and ceremony of a coronation?
Oh, absolutely. It's more, without the support of the people, there is no monarchy. But we've seen the king fulfil that excellently in the first few days after his mother's death, when he went out to Scotland, to Ireland, to Northern Ireland and to Wales, connecting with the people and ensuring people realised he was a king of all parts of this kingdom.
Yeah. So what are the actual parts of the ceremony that you're worried would go and that you'd like to see?
Well, when you're cutting off 2.5 hours, where do you begin? Well, but there are a lot of ancient ceremonies involving the peerage, but things like wearing the coronation robes. Normally, you have all the members of the House of Lords and the peers, the dukes and the earls, wearing their coronation robes, which are being held in storage. There's no cost involved in any of this. They're not being made anew. And now we're told perhaps it'll be just lounge suits. You know, I mean, if you're going to have a grand event, I've always used to say that the inauguration of a president in America is a cheap form of a coronation, really. Let's actually keep the grandeur that we have. We saw the great glory of the Queen's funeral. Everybody loved the pomp and pageantry there. It will be shame to lose part of that.
And will it be a big bank holiday weekend? It's the same weekend, isn't it, that Platinum Jubilee was this year? So next year it'll be a big sort of national party, is that?
Yeah, we assume so. It's taking place on June the 3rd, a day after the coronation of Her Majesty the Queen, and actually it will be 70 years to the day plus 1 day after the Queen's own coronation.
I just want to ask you about the front cover of The Sun this morning. They're talking about the Crown, which is about to come out on Netflix, which shows a sort of segment about Prince Philip pursuing an affair with Penny Natchbull. Lots of upset from royalists that this is disrespectful so shortly after the death of Her Majesty the Queen, whether it's true or not.
Yes, there had been some hope that saner heads would decide to perhaps delay the release of The Crown in some capacity. You know, the people have to realise The Crown is actually a work of fiction. And I've just been watching, you know, the Jeffrey Dahmer Netflix documentary, and at the beginning they always say, this is a work of fiction based on historical events. Something like that sort of a disclaimer is well overdue for The Crown, because particularly in Canada and America and Australia, people watch that as if it's a documentary, and unfortunately they get to these...
They're going to be disappointed about James Bond, aren't they?
What about James Bond?
Well, just being fiction is what I'm saying.
Oh, right, yes. Well, some people still write to Sherlock Holmes, you know.
Well, exactly, yeah. Does he not work for the Met?
But just to be clear, there is no evidence that there was an affair. I mean, they had a very close friendship, but we don't know if there was ever an affair between the two of them. No. All right, well, thank you very much, Rafe Hadelmanku, Royal Broadcaster and historian, regular on the show. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It is 8:18. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening this morning then. Several explosions reported to have taken place in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, as well as Lviv and Ternopil in the west. The mayor of Kyiv said it is an attack from Russian terrorists and is urging residents to stay in shelters whilst the city is on alert. It's after Russia's President Putin accused Ukraine of the Kerch Bridge bombing, calling it an act of terror.
Vigils have been held across County Donegal in memory of the 10 people killed in a petrol station explosion. 8 other people were injured in the blast in the village of Creeslough on Friday. Irish authorities say the incident's being treated as a tragic accident, though investigations are ongoing.
Scotland's First Minister is expected to announce a further bid for independence later today. Nicola Sturgeon will close the SNP conference in Aberdeen today by telling delegates that UK nations and the Republic of Ireland will always be family.
Right, what are your views on whether or not cannabis should be upgraded to a Class A drug, or do you think it should be legalised? Do you think the way we treat alcohol should be different? Let us know your thoughts this morning. This all in response to what our new Home Secretary thinks. We're talking about that after the break, but first of all, your Monday morning forecast. Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking early rain clearing the southeast with sunny spells following scattered showers in the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Well, a dry and locally chilly start to the day with plenty of sunshine, although a little cloud is possible at first in the east. Breezy, especially along northern coasts at first. Cloud and patchy rain will take most of the morning to fully clear, but dry and sunny conditions will follow from the north. Breezy around coastal areas with an isolated shower possible across North Wales. Otherwise, it will be dry with plenty of sunshine for all. A rather breezy day, especially towards the northwest, where the odd isolated shower is possible during the morning. Otherwise, it will be dry with plenty of prolonged sunny spells for all. It will be a dry day, but also rather breezy, especially over the hills and coasts, and there will be some patchy cloud, but also plenty of prolonged sunny spells throughout the rest of the day. Rather windy, especially in the west, where local gales are possible at first. Scattered showers are also likely in the west, drier in the east with sunny spells for all. Windy with coastal gales possible at first. Showers are likely in the north, but drier elsewhere. Some cloud at times, but plenty of sunny spells are expected throughout the day. So showers and winds will ease in the northwest, but elsewhere remaining dry with sunny or clear spells into the evening. And that's how the weather is shaping up for your Monday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back, it's 8:23, still to come on the programme this morning with Maxine premiering on Channel 5 tonight, detailing a dramatised version of So a Murderer, co-conspirator Maxine Carr. We're asking if our obsessions for true crime shows have gone too far.
And coming up at 9, as the government prepares to announce a £122 million support package for workers struggling with their mental health, we'll be speaking to Work and Pensions Minister Victoria Prentice.
And as ever, do get in touch. We love to hear from you. GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBnews.
It is 8:23. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is considering upgrading cannabis from a Class B drug to a Class A drug because of evidence linking use to psychosis, cancer and birth defects.
Well, critics to the plan have said that upgrading its status will have a big impact on the workload of the police. The judicial system would also feel the strain with an increased sentence for possession, and drug suppliers could face life imprisonment.
Well, consultant neurologist and medical cannabis expert Professor Mike Barnes joins us this morning. Mike, the Home Secretary has said that upgrading it to a Class A drug would send the cultural and political signal that it is unacceptable.
Yeah, I think it's such a sad reflection. I mean, the rest of the world is going in the opposite direction. It's downgrading, if you like, cannabis. And only last week, if you recall, President Biden announced that those who've been federally committed of simple possession will be pardoned. It's now legal for at least medical purposes in 67 countries around the world. The United Nations is beginning to downgrade its international category. So, we're very much on a limb if the Home Secretary really thinks it's the right thing to do to increase its scheduling to Class A. That's just totally the wrong direction and sends totally the wrong message about its benefits, which we should really put first. It's the benefits to people with medical problems that we need to put in the forefront of our minds.
Well, Conservatives have long been the party of law and order, haven't they? They've had this war on drugs. They've been trying to reduce use of it and criminalisation of it. They've tried to increase. But they really point to the evidence that links cannabis specifically to psychosis, the problems with bipolar, cancer and birth defects. I mean, those are good reasons, aren't they, to try and clamp down on this?
They'd be very good reasons if they were true, but sadly they're not. There is no evidence at all that cannabis causes cancer. In fact, the opposite. Most cannabinoids that have been tested, cannabinoids are the cannabis components found in the plant, are anti-cancer. There was one paper by a very well-known anti-cannabis academic about a month ago that purported to show that it caused birth defects and cancer. Sadly, a couple of weeks later, that same journal refuted that and showed the statistics were wrong. But people have alighted on that and conveniently forgotten the refutation of that paper. It does cause psychosis in a few people, but that's high THC street cannabis. It does not cause psychosis. It's very, very rare in those medically using it. And there's a nice paper by a guy called Eamonn who showed that you've got to stop 11,000 men and 29,000 women from smoking cannabis to prevent one case of psychosis. So we've got to put it into perspective. It's not a dangerous drug.
If it was made a Class A drug, though, those who deal it would get life instead of 14 years. So increasing the severity of that sentence would put people off dealing it.
I don't think there's any evidence at all that the scheduling of cannabis stops people using it. In fact, the war on drugs has been internationally shown to be a complete failure. That the use of cannabis has gone up 10% in the decade 98 to 2008, where the war on drugs was at its sort of peak. The most draconian laws in Western Europe are France, which are the second highest cannabis users in Western Europe. So there was absolutely no evidence that making the scheduling more severe makes any difference to the actual usage, sadly. And we've got to think, what about those 1.4 million people in this country use it illegally, but for medical use, for their own personal benefit, for their own medical conditions? Are we really saying that some of those people would need to go to prison for trying to help themselves for a drug that's actually legal to prescribe in this country? It was made legal to prescribe in 2018. So this is a very peculiar, very sad day for cannabis if the Home Secretary goes through with this quite mad suggestion.
Yeah, and you point to the example of other countries, getting softer on cannabis. I'm just interested in what the experiences of countries like the Netherlands, like Canada, is on alcohol use where cannabis is legalised. Do you see a link between the two?
There is definitely a link. There is less alcohol use when cannabis is legalised. and less tobacco use. And there's no doubt, no one suggesting that alcohol and tobacco are safe. They're not safe. We know that. Less use surely is a good thing. And if we can substitute alcohol or tobacco for cannabis, that must be a good thing. There's no evidence that cannabis is dangerous to anything like the same extent as alcohol and tobacco.
Professor Mike Barnes, really appreciate your thoughts on that this morning. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Philip has got in touch with us this morning. Morning, Philip, who says that upgrading cannabis to Class A would push prices higher, making dealers richer, pushing crime rates higher.
Well, they'd also possibly face life imprisonment, which is a worry. Look, after the break, we'll be going through your Monday morning papers with Tessie Ojo and Nigel Nelson. Lots to go through with them, so don't go anywhere.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 8:31. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this morning. The Conservative MP for Chelsea and Fulham has been elected as the new International Trade Minister. Greg Hand replaces MP Conor Burns, who was sacked last week following allegations of misconduct. The new Secretary of State tweeted that the appointment had been an honour and a privilege. Scotland's First Minister is expected to announce a further bid for independence. Nicola Sturgeon will close the SNP conference in Aberdeen today by telling delegates that UK nations and the Republic of Ireland will always be family. This week, the Supreme Court will rule if a prospective bill to hold another vote is within the powers of Holyrood. The England captain, Harry Kane, will become the latest celebrity to appear on CBeebies Bedtime Stories. The Tottenham striker will read The Lion Inside, all about overcoming fear and finding your inner lion through self-belief. Harry's episode will coincide with World Mental Health Day today.
Right, let's go through the papers then this morning with the CEO of the Diana Award, Tessie Ojo, and the political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. Tessie, let's start with you. The cost of living crisis creating a mental health time bomb, says the Mirror.
Absolutely. This is a piece from Dame Kelly Holmes, who really just talked about how, again, everything we've been saying before, the cost of living crisis and increased bill and less, we're talking about possibly a blackout in the winter and all of that. And actually, she's written this piece encouraging the government to pay attention, to do something, because it's a time bomb. we are going to see the impact at some point, and I feel like we're sleepwalking into it. And when that thing happens, we all go, oh my goodness, how did we miss this? And I completely agree with her article saying, open your eyes, pay attention, do something now. This is a time bomb that would happen at some point.
And they are announcing £122 million today. We've got Vicky Prentice from the government on in a few moments' time to talk about that. But we spoke to, I think it was a psychiatrist, forensic psychiatrist a little bit earlier on in the programme, who said that mental health provision in this country is diabolical, and that simply will not be enough. It needs complete overhaul right from the very bottom so that people can get face-to-face help very early on to stop it getting more serious.
Absolutely,
yeah.
and the fact is that people are being turned away from hospitals because they're too hard pressed. And these are people who actually they've got mental health problems, they need help. It could be self-harm, it could be something more serious like suicide. And over the last year, that you've seen an awful lot of people, nearly 1 million people, turned away because they just can't get that help. And if you don't intervene early, it just makes matters even worse.
Absolutely. And the thing is, we're talking about those that have there's almost different layers. We're not talking about that low-level early support, like the first aids. We're not even talking about that. And there's some people that if we intervene early now, we can catch before it becomes worse. And even whilst we're talking about general mental health support, there's also the mental health support that's culturally competent. And that's a whole different conversation that just a general support system will not capture if we're not actually being intentional about being culturally competent in our support.
Yeah, well, those are really good points. We'll put them to the Minister at the DWP, Victoria Prentice, later on this hour. Nigel, I'm just interested. Page 8 of The Sun, MI5 wants applications from women and minorities, and it says licence to Jill.
That is the headline of the day.
Yes, it's a great headline, absolutely. What MI5 is saying is that they've got some £33,000 a year jobs going, but they want to confine the people who get them to women and ethnic minorities. Now, quite clearly, you can't nowadays in multicultural Britain have a surveillance team made up of white middle-aged men. They'd stand out like a sore thumb. The only question really here is that the word in the advert for it is that it's only these people, only women, only people from ethnic minority backgrounds are they recruiting, which makes you wonder if, well, hang on, are there not other people out there they might need too? So I understand why they want to get more diversity in MI5, as many organisations are doing. It would certainly make sense. It would be better for national security to have that. But to actually row out a complete section of the population who now can't apply seems to be going one stage too far.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that isn't this on the backdrop of having done an audit? So they've audited themselves, they've identified the gaps, and they've been intentional about filling that gap, and I applaud that. However, I would often say getting people in is just the first step. What are the structures you have in place to ensure progression? It's not just about getting people in to tick the box, to say, we now have a diverse workforce. What are those policies that hold people back? We understand that glass ceiling happens. So when these people come in, how long do they actually stay with you before you fall short again and then roll out another?
Because people say to us, those people who have ticked a box, they then feel they're being judged that they're only there because they ticked a box, and they don't want that to be the case.
That's the other side of it, absolutely.
A meritocracy has to be the ambition for everyone. We just need to have better opportunities lower down.
Bear in mind, MI5, they've had 2 women Director Generals. So, I mean, certainly women can get to the top there. Obviously, that you've got to consider people from ethnic backgrounds, whether or not that's the same kind of progression. But I think you're absolutely right, Isabel, that there is this sort of feeling that how much of a leg up are you giving people, and are people getting to the top by their own skills and efforts?
Yeah, and also, if I may throw in, when you apply for a job, normally you've got the bit of the form that kind of talks about how you identify, right? And they always say that's separate from the application, isn't it? So what I'm thinking is sometimes it's not quite clear whether you belong to an ethnic minority or not. So I class myself as mixed race, but because it's on my dad's side, my surname is anglicised. So would I get in? Am I counted as an ethnic minority when I apply to MI5 or not? It's not quite. I'd be interested to know how clear that is.
Yeah. But I feel like because they have, I'm not a huge person to say, look, just go for it for the purpose of it. But if you've gone through a clear process and you've identified a group that you need to improve your services, then by all means say this is, and again, you can decide ethnic minority is a huge thing. Who exactly, what exactly are you looking for? Does that include disability? I mean, it probably doesn't because that's ethnic minorities, but that's also huge. Define it a little bit better, make it more clear.
Can't you do that on a point system, though? I mean, in other words, that I don't see any reason why, if you need to recruit certain groups of people, if those people come forward, they get more points to begin with. But it's the idea of actually rowing out completely everybody else. That's the bit that I find
isn't it that they have that everybody else? For example, I have no inside info on this particular story, but if you have a workforce of 100 and actually you're thinking we need at least 5 people, whatever, to make us a bit balanced, to be more reflective of the community that we serve. What's the point of saying these 5 people, anybody can apply? Why don't you say what you really want? It's because
the colour of your skin effectively doesn't affect your ability to do the job.
Well,
Surely
exactly.
and if you're only appointing people based on the colour of their skin rather than their abilities, then you're just damaging the quality of the...
But I don't think that's what they're saying. They are saying we want to be intentional about that we want this group. That doesn't mean they're going to wade through all the skills. That doesn't mean they're going to get a free pass. That means they're going to go through the process. They will have all the competencies, but they're going to be intentional in who they're looking for.
Well, let us know your views at home on all of this, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Nigel, people working from the pub, they're claiming this is to save on energy. I mean, they could work in a library or they could work in a cafe, but they've gone down the boozer.
But it so happens a pub group is offering this idea, which is Young's is a pub chain with 185 pubs. Anyway, for £15 a day, what you can do is that you can go to the pub, that they will give you a quiet space, they'll plug in all your electronics, you'll get lunch while you're there, unlimited tea or coffee. Sounds a bit like being here, doesn't it? And at the end of the day, if you fancy a drink, a gin and tonic or a beer, you can have that too. I think this is a great idea.
I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously what you don't want to do is find that people end up spending all day at the bar, but as long as they're actually working, I think that we've had a reset after COVID. Flexible working is much more around for all of us. And if you don't want the isolation of being at home, the fact that you can perhaps just go down the road and set up your laptop in a pub or whatever seems to me quite a good idea.
You don't think that people might get drunk whilst working?
Well, there's always a danger
I mean,
of that.
an actual danger, like a legitimate concern. If you've got that temptation, you're there, and everyone's drinking around you.
But I mean, if you think about it, if you're working from home and you're a drinker, you've probably got a cocktail cabinet
I think
there
Jacob
anyway.
Rees-Mogg might have something to say about it.
I'm sorry?
Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Oh, he won't like it.
But I think employers have to be increasingly flexible, allowing people to work where they can and be their best self. So, I think being creative at this time, especially where people don't want to hit their homes, if that helps, yeah. But also you have to be self-disciplined.
Yeah. Tessie, you wanted to talk about a story in the Mirror about the quality falling in children's school meals, something that we've touched on this morning on the programme.
Indeed. I think that, for many, many families, if you flip back to the pandemic when actually there was a big campaign to make sure that kids got their free school meals, even if they weren't going into school, because loads of families depend on this one hot meal a day to get their children through. And research shows now that the quality, about 52% of providers says the quality of the meal is going to drop. And that just, like, you're thinking, then what are we offering? We weren't talking about top-notch food. Anyway, we're talking about at least the basic necessities, but it's hot.
Yeah.
Now, if we're saying the quality is going to drop, then what next?
And I think you can just take this story and apply it to social care, to hospitals, and it's the same problem. And I think it is a huge issue. I went to visit a friend in hospital on Friday. Her lunch was brought in. It was a shriveled up jacket potato, tiny, with a packet piece of butter and a little tub of cheese. And you know, she's ill. And, you know, your food is how you get well. And these children are growing and they need to learn in school. And nutrition is important. And it's a huge problem, I think.
Yeah, well, the figures are that for infant school meals, they just get £2.41 for each meal. For free school meals, when you're a bit older, £2.47. That's a very small amount to actually provide somebody with a lunch and a proper nutritious lunch, which might be their main meal of the day. Otherwise, they wouldn't be getting it. So I think they need to look at just how much money you have to spend on these things.
Well, there are economies of scale. You'd be surprised how much you can make for a small amount of money when you've got 600 meals to make. You can buy loads of tinned tomato or whatever for sort of discounted amount. But yeah, you're right. No, I'm told that's how you can make these meals on a shoestring.
Economies of scale, absolutely.
Well, I think it's about what we prioritise. We just need to prioritise, look after our young. We just need to get better at that.
Yeah, they are the future. It wasn't just the Lionel Richie line. Nigel, in the Daily Mail, be a good boy, your dog behaves like you.
Yes, indeed. And this is...
I like this.
I love this survey. Yeah. It's by the Kennel Club. What it is that we don't just look like our dogs, but apparently we behave like them. And so when we choose a dog, we choose a dog that behaves a bit like us. So if you're a Border Terrier owner, you're likely to be charming. If you have a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, you're trustworthy. A King Charles Spaniel, you tend to be loyal. A Schnauzer, then you have an agreeable personality. What I want to see when I go out from here is they don't mention Dachshund owners. So I want to see if we find sort of people waddling around with little legs if they were Dachshund.
Looking at your legs, thinking, they look in proportion.
Do you have a dog yourself?
No, I've got 2 cats.
2 cats, right.
I was going to say, what about people who do not have dogs? I don't have a dog.
Are you a cat owner yourself?
No.
Or no?
I love children.
Right.
I have no space for pets.
OK. Well, sometimes there can be similar challenges, but pets and children.
Yeah. But I think that's funny. That's hilarious. Not only does it look like you, but behaves like you. Tessie, you wanted to talk about the Premier League. This is in the Metro. This is about the Gunners. Tell us more.
So just want to caveat that I do not support any club in particular.
I saw this and I thought you'd be an Arsenal fan.
Well, to be fair, so my husband supports Arsenal, my son supports Man U, so I'm very neutral in my household.
Right, OK.
Very sensible.
Literally. But so this story really caught my attention, obviously from I think it was the other summer with Saka, when he lost the penalty and he got lots of racial abuse.
Yeah, this is in the European Championship final.
This is it. And that's when kind of that story caught my attention. And just yesterday, somehow I caught the end of the match and I saw him getting ready to take this penalty and my heart sank because I remembered that. And he got it and he won and he scored. And it was just such an incredible story of victory. I think we talked earlier about the lion inside, and there's just something about the courage and that made him, so many times in life when you get knocked down, you think that's it, I'm done, I'm out. But there was something for me that caught my attention that felt, what a courageous person, he's only 21 as well, and the abuse he suffered a couple of years ago could have made him think, you know what, I'm done with this. But I just thought that was such a brave and courageous story, and I wanted to share that.
Oh, thank you. That's a really nice note to end on.
Great example of resilience and adversity.
The lion inside. I think that's it. We've done all of our stories. Tessie Ojo, CEO of Diana Awards, and Nigel Nelson, political editor at the Sunday Mirror, I should say. Is that right? Yes, it says Daily Mirror on here. I'm getting confused now. Thank you both very much indeed for going through the papers with us this morning.
Thank you for having us.
It is 8:47. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening this morning. Explosions have been hitting cities across Ukraine, including the capital Kyiv, whilst we've been on air. It's after Russia's President Putin accused Ukraine of the Kerch Bridge bombing, calling it an act of terror. The bridge connects occupied Crimea and Russia and was damaged by a truck explosion at the weekend.
Vigils have been held across County Donegal in memory of the 10 people killed in a petrol station explosion. 8 other people were injured in the blast in the village of Creesler on Friday. Irish authorities say the incident's being treated as a tragic accident, though investigations are ongoing.
Nearly a quarter of mental health patients are waiting more than 12 weeks to start treatment, with many turning to A&E. Data from the Royal College of Psychiatrists found 43% of the waits for treatment led to their mental health getting worse. It's 8:48. Let's look ahead to tonight's TV because a new crime drama called Maxine about the co-conspirator involved in the murder of schoolgirls Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman will hit our screens.
Well, this follows a number of other true crime dramas and documentaries, specifically Dahmer, detailing the grisly murders by Jeffrey Dahmer. Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Soham Das joins us now to discuss why we are all so obsessed with true crime on TV or indeed on podcasts. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. What is it? Is it kind of like the rubbernecking tendency that we all have, whether we like to admit it or not?
Good morning to you both. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, good question. So I would categorise it into three different areas, the reason that we're obsessed with true crime. First of all, we like to be armchair detectives. We like to be armchair psychiatrists, and also we like this sense of justice. So as detectives, we like the thrill of solving puzzles. And when documentaries and even dramas are made well, they reveal little bits of information. So we like to sit back in our sofas and try and piece together who did it and why they did it. And in terms of the psychoanalysis, I think that sometimes some of the perpetrators seem on the surface relatively normal, relatively human. So we're fascinated with what drives some people, a minority of people, into committing these dark kind of acts. So we're trying to sort of psychoanalyze what aspects of their childhood forced them down that road. And then finally, I would say that almost everybody, we have this innate sense of justice, right? So it was spoon-fed to us since we were kids that the bad guys need to get punished. So I think we get a certain satisfaction by seeing justice being served. So I think those are the different areas.
Yeah, it's also, if I may add another one, the fact that it is true that it did actually happen makes it darker and more believable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, fiction's always fun, but life is stranger than fiction, especially when it comes to true crime. Yeah, so sometimes we can't fathom how some people can do such horrid, twisted things.
And, as you say, people like to see justice served, but quite often what's gripping in these stories, and I think of my own obsession with Making a Murderer, which was my first introduction, really, to the world of true crime, which followed the Avery's family who'd been involved in this, in a case. And there was this sense that perhaps there was a miscarriage of justice in all of this, and you kind of... You get on board, don't you, with their campaigns, and you find yourself... I mean, I'm desperate for an update in this case, and sometimes it's the miscarriage of justice that really attracts attention.
Yeah, I would agree. So I think our first need is for this sense of justice. And as you say, when it doesn't happen, we like to feel outraged on behalf of the victims or on behalf of the falsely accused. So, yeah, we want to see that story ending. We want some sort of story arc to know that eventually somehow justice is served. And I would add to that by saying that sometimes the documentaries and the programs themselves lead to justice. So they shine light on and pay attention to cases that have otherwise kind of fallen by the wayside. So this added attention makes police reinvestigate. And in some cases, it does actually bring justice where it wouldn't previously have been served.
It does also sometimes glamorise people involved in these cases, doesn't it? And I'm thinking of, in Making a Murderer, there were weddings in prison, there were love letters being sent to convicts. Is that sometimes a negative to all of this, that we get sort of, perhaps we think we know more than the jurors or the judges in the cases and know better than that and fall in love with the wrong people?
Yeah, I think there's always a risk. I think it's a fine line between putting out information for education and making it a bit too lurid for entertainment. And I think some documentary makers and people that make dramas manage to straddle that line very well. And I think some go over the top. But you're right. There are occasions where there's information or at least opinions formed on perpetrators that are made or are forced by the narrative of particular documentaries rather than factual information. So there is a risk that you can skew trials or you can skew public opinion. Absolutely.
Soham Das, really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Now from true crime to geese. Castle Espy and County Down are having their Brent weekend, which celebrates the annual arrival of the Canadian Brent geese.
These birds travel 3,000 miles from Arctic Canada to spend the winter in Strangford Lough. Doogie Beattie has gone along to find out more.
Strangford Lough is a summer destination for leisure activities, but just as we are starting to feel the cold, new holiday makers arrive.
These birds fly down from the Canadian high Arctic every year to this part of Strangford Lough, travelling over 3,000 miles, and it's the eelgrass here that attracts them, and it's one of the most amazing wildlife spectacles in Europe, and here it is in Northern Ireland.
Paul Stewart is the manager in Castle Espy Wetland Centre and monitors the brent geese that holiday here.
Normally you think of birds migrating, you think of them leaving and going south to warmer climes. And that's what's happening with the brent geese. They're leaving in Canada and they're coming down here, so we think our winters are cold and horrible. Actually, compared to northern Canada, the climate here is quite mild. So migration can work both ways.
Strangford's rhythm of life is a finely balanced one. As the swallows go south, the mackerel comes in and the geese touch down. The shoreline here is riddled by the scars of an industrial past, but nature's ability to fill the void has encouraged man to look after its wildlife.
So it's amazing to think that this habitat here actually used to be the site of a lot of heavy industry. There was quarrying here, there were brickworks, and there were schooners used to come in and take the bricks away, and there were lime kilns here for creating lime. So it was a very, there was a lot of heavy industry going on here, not the sort of thing you'd associate with wildlife. But then when the brickworks closed in the latter half of the 19th century, nature subsumed all these old quarries. And now what was an industrial site is now a wildlife bonanza, really. The mosaic of wetland habitats here is really quite exceptional.
An estimated 25,000 birds have now arrived and will stay to the early new year. They will then begin the whole circle once more. Doogie BD, GB News.
Oh, some geese.
Amazing story.
Geeses.
After the break, we're going to be talking about World Mental Health Day, and we've got lots of emails coming in this morning about that. Sean says, I've suffered mental health problems as a young man and tried to get help and was told to man up, that awful phrase. There was very little to help men. We've got to stop ignoring men's health, and you're absolutely right. 3/4 of suicides are in men, and apparently you're 10 times more likely to kill yourself as a man from a deprived area than you are from a man from a well-off, more affluent area, which is really shocking. Just goes to show how important levelling up really is.
Yeah, Philip says, I would never recommend the NHS for mental health care. Depression is my problem and I have to live with it. That's what I have been told. Karen says, I've been waiting since February for an appointment with psychotherapy.
Lynn says, I believe one of the breakdowns is in the community. People are so isolated. Families move away from each other. Neighbours don't know each other. Sometimes just chatting over a cuppa is the best thing. Lynn, I 100% agree. We definitely aren't helping ourselves when it comes to all of these things. We'll be putting lots of these things to Victoria Prentice. She's the Minister of State for the Department of Work and Pensions. She's joining us just after 9 o'clock.
Yeah, coming up, Andrew Pearce is here as well to review all the top stories of the day. But first of all, let's find out how the weather is looking.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking early rain clearing the southeast with sunny spells following scattered showers in the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Well, a dry and locally chilly start to the day with plenty of sunshine, although a little cloud is possible at first in the east. Breezy, especially along northern coasts at first. Cloud and patchy rain will take most of the morning to fully clear, but dry and sunny conditions will follow from the north. Breezy around coastal areas with an isolated shower possible across North Wales. Otherwise, it will be dry with plenty of sunshine for all. A rather breezy day, especially towards the northwest, where the odd isolated shower is possible during the morning. Otherwise, it will be dry with plenty of prolonged sunny spells for all. It will be a dry day, but also rather breezy, especially over the hills and coasts, and there will be some patchy cloud, but also plenty of prolonged sunny spells throughout the rest of the day. Rather windy, especially in the west, where local gales are possible at first. Scattered showers are also likely in the west, drier in the east with sunny spells for all. Windy with coastal gales possible at first. Showers are likely in the north, but drier elsewhere. Some cloud at times, but plenty of sunny spells are expected throughout the day. So showers and winds will ease in the northwest, but elsewhere remaining dry with sunny or clear spells into the evening. And that's how the weather is shaping up for your Monday.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
The PM faces another big U-turn as Tory rebels warn of a backlash against her benefits cuts plan.
Good morning, it's 9:01. It's Monday, October the 10th. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Paul Hawkins.
Our top story this morning then, Cabinet Ministers urging Conservative MPs to unite after another week of infighting. Dozens of backbenchers warn they'll rebel against benefits rising in line with earnings rather than September's inflation figures.
President Putin has called Saturday's attack on Crimea's Kerch Bridge an act of terrorism. It comes as 13 people were killed yesterday by Russian missile strikes in the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia.
It's World Mental Health Day today, with 1 in 4 of us reportedly struggling every year. As the government prepared to announce a £122 million support package for workers, we'll discover the best ways to seek help and improve our well-being.
And a slimmed down ceremony for a slimmed down monarchy. We'll have more details about King Charles's coronation, which is expected to take place next summer.
And as ever, you can get in touch with us on the programme this morning, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can drop us a tweet at gbnews. But our top story this morning then, Cabinet Ministers, including Suella Braverman and Penny Mordaunt, pleading for the Conservative Party to show loyalty to the PM.
Well, this comes as another big U-turn is reportedly on the cards, with several Tory MPs warning the government they would lose a vote on a real-term cut to benefits. Well, all of this whilst the SNP conference is coming to a close today, with Nicola Sturgeon giving a speech and expected to reiterate her desire to push through next year's planned independence referendum.
Well, for the latest, we can go to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Morning, Darren. There he is in Aberdeen at the SNP conference. Darren, big speech from Nicola Sturgeon later today, and surely she will allude to independence, especially given what is happening at the Supreme Court starting tomorrow.
Yeah, indeed. Should we start with Westminster politics first of all? And as you say, this U-turn, though, of course, the government would claim it's not a U-turn, given the fact they've not properly announced what they want to do when it comes to wages and inflation, whether it's going to be those benefits increases linked to wages or at the higher rate of inflation. But it's clear that the government are, I think, almost certainly now going to go down that route of linking it to inflation. Why is that? Simply the pressure from the backbenchers within the government, within the cabinet, is simply too strong. We've even heard from people like Penny Mordaunt and Jacob Rees-Mogg, who both sit around that cabinet table insisting that they want to see benefits increase with inflation. Also, just another notable thing this morning is that actually when it comes to barristers, you may remember they were out on strike over the last month or so. Well, this morning they've managed to sign a deal essentially with the government to bring that strike to an end. Let's talk about Scotland. As you say, I'm here in Aberdeen. We are expecting to hear from Nicola Sturgeon later on this afternoon. She can make a speech to the SNP conference, and unsurprisingly in many ways, Paul, this conference has been dominated by the issue of independence, Scotland's place within the UK. After all, the SNP did pretty well in last year's Holyrood elections. And Nicola Sturgeon's argument is that it should be up to MSPs, up to the Scottish Parliament to decide when there should be, or if there should be, a new independence referendum. She wants one in October of next year, but Westminster are insistent it is up to them and they do not want one. And that is why tomorrow the Supreme Court is going to start having hearings essentially on this issue, make a judgment about who has got that final say. It's going to take a couple of months. Most people seem to think in the end they will decide to go for Westminster and say that it's not up to Scotland, and then that will lead to kind of plan B that we think Nicola Sturgeon is planning to do, which is have this de facto referendum around the Westminster general election in 2024. But in the end, you know what, the SNP keep coming up against these kind of constitutional barriers, and there are big questions about if they are determined to pursue independence, which again Nicola Sturgeon is going to talk about this afternoon. She says she's not prepared to give up an independence. What precisely do they do next? Because the polls at the moment also, they've been pretty consistent over the last couple of years, are 50-50 in all of this. And actually polls suggesting that people think a referendum should be held now are pretty low. Only around a third of voters would want to see a referendum anytime soon. And there are a lot of people outside the conference hall here in Aberdeen and elsewhere in Scotland who frankly think the Scottish Government and Nicola Sturgeon should spend more time focusing on things like the cost of living crisis, energy security and taxation rather than on the independence question. Now, I think Nicola Sturgeon will acknowledge that later on, and there will be a lot of focus on the cost of living, and indeed those attacks, I suspect, on the Conservative Party will continue as well.
OK, Darren, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, do let us know your thoughts on what Darren had to say, and also on the U-turn. I say that on on rising, on increasing benefits in line with inflation or wages, because she didn't explicitly say that she was going to do that, did she? She was going to write. They said they were considering linking it to wages.
Yes,
so it's not actually a U-turn.
You don't think it's a U-turn? I mean, I don't think it's exactly her plan, was it? So I don't think it was what she wanted to do, put it that way, but she's certainly trying to sort of hedge her language quite carefully, isn't she, at the moment? Keep your thoughts coming in this morning. We'll be speaking to Victoria Prentice from the DWP in just a moment about all of this. We'll be talking to her about World Mental Health Day as well. That is today, of course. And we've been talking about the shocking number of suicides, one in the UK every 90 minutes, 5,000 in 2021 in England alone. 3/4 of those are men. Lots of you have been getting in touch with mental health stories this morning, letting us know how difficult you have found it to get in touch with mental health support. And in fact, we spoke, didn't we, to a psychiatrist earlier on in the programme who said that mental health provision in this country was diabolical.
Yeah, she said it wasn't good enough, the amount of money that they're ploughing into it. So we'll put that clip, by the way, to that minister from the Department for work and pensions. But in the meantime, it is 7 minutes past 9. Since 2013, the number of disabled people in employment has increased by 1.5 million.
That leaves almost half of all people with a disability out of work, and for many, it's hard to find meaningful employment.
Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has been finding out more.
In the UK, 1 in 5 of the working age population are considered to be disabled, and yet many of these people struggle to find employment.
Do you like working with me?
2 times, yeah.
2, sometimes.
Meet the standout brothers. Ross has Down syndrome and has previously struggled to find work. That was until his brother, Christian, stepped in to help.
We started with free socks, didn't we?
Yeah. But hey, guys.
Got 22 now, launched a company with free socks.
A lot. These socks are like different colours. Black ladies here. Bad boys here.
What began as a way to get Ross out of the house during lockdown has now turned into meaningful employment for both brothers.
So Ross's big dream is to go to Tokyo, Japan, so hopefully the business will be able to make that happen. For myself, I'd love to help people that are in Ross's position. They're not just socks, for example. People see them and say, what are they about? And you can say,
go make.
They're a good make, yeah. And you can tell people about our Ross, and you can tell people about what we're trying to do. And then hopefully further down the line, we'll be able to start employing, which is the big dream, innit?
All times.
However, for many in Ross's position, they don't have a brother like Christian to step in and help. Why is it so important to you, disability equality, to help people with disabilities to find employment?
I think it's really important that disabled people can, and know they can, live in the real world. So that's everything from education to employment to housing to socialising to leisure, etc. And it's really important because disabled people have a lot to offer.
But it's an ongoing battle. Mel has worked there for 25 years and she still says her work isn't done.
The problem we have got is tackling negative attitudes. So that's really difficult. So what we still see is lots of those negative attitudes, lots of the I don't think you can do that. So whilst the physical environment is changing, I think there's still a long way to go around attitudes.
But things are changing, and for the Standout brothers, they'll continue to put their best sock forward. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Now, this morning, barristers voted to suspend their current strike action, with 57% in favour of ending their absence from the court.
The Criminal Bar Association said the offer from the government is an overdue start. Its acceptance by barristers is on the basis that is implemented. Otherwise, the CBA will ballot again to lift the suspension of action.
Well, joining us now to tell us more is the chair of the Criminal Bar Association, Kirsty Brimelow. A very interesting decision, this. So you've suspended the action. Tell us why.
An offer was made by the government, which has been accepted by criminal barristers in a ballot. The ballot was close, however. There's still a huge amount of anger there. The offer really did hit the demands of the criminal bar. However, a number of barristers still consider that it hasn't gone far enough. There's still a lot of trust in government that has to be realised, and we hope that this is the start of a constructive arrangement. There's a lot of stress at the bar. It really is ridiculous that barristers have had to take this action. It's not our job to point out that there's been chronic underfunding in the criminal justice system. And it's also not our job to make clear that the money is needed in order to stop the whole system just literally crashing over the cliff. And so that anger remains, but we really hope now that there can be a constructive engagement and working forward and proper funding for the criminal justice system. In other words, this is just a start.
What does the government have to do then to regain your trust?
First of all, there is an independent review panel which is being set up It's not actually a pay review body, but it is similar to a pay review body. It looks at policies and then looks at the funding of those policies. Now, that body has to be one which has teeth, as is set out in the terms of reference, and it has to be shown to have teeth in that where there are recommendations, government really should act on those recommendations going forward and provide the required funds in order for its policies to succeed. Otherwise, what's happening is government tends to announce criminal justice policies, there's no funding alongside them, and then ultimately they fail, or certainly they're failing now because barristers have now said we no longer are working for nothing.
OK, really good and interesting to hear all of that. Kirsty Casey, I should say, sorry, still want to call everybody QCs, chair of the Criminal Bar Association, with that breaking news that they have voted this morning to suspend their current strike action. Thank you.
It is 9:13. Let's bring you up to date with some other stories this morning, including the breaking news that explosions have been hitting cities across Ukraine while we've been on air. That includes the capital, Kyiv. It's after Russia's President Putin accused Ukraine of the Kerch Bridge bombing, calling it an act of terror. That's the bridge that connects occupied Crimea with Russia. It was damaged by a truck explosion at the weekend.
Vigils have been held across County Donegal in memory of the 10 people killed in a petrol station explosion. 8 other people were injured in the blast in the village of Creesler on Friday. Irish authorities say the incident's being treated as a tragic accident. The investigations are ongoing.
England captain Harry Kane will become the latest celebrity to appear on CBeebies Bedtime Stories. The Tottenham striker will read The Lion Inside, which is all about overcoming fear and finding your inner lion through self-belief. Harry's episode will coincide with World Mental Health Day today.
Stay with us. After the break, Andrew Pearce will be here to take us through his top picks of the day, and we're also hoping to catch up with a member of the government. We'll see you in a sec. In fact, that we're told to keep going. So should we talk about some GB news? Can I read a few?
Yeah, let's do. Yeah, one of the other stories we've been talking about this morning is the Home Secretary wanting to upgrade, as it were, cannabis to a Class A drug. Linda says, I used to work in psychological therapy, and I can say there was evidence in some people of paranoid thinking with cannabis use.
Yeah, that was interesting because we had a professor on who said that the links were very, very small on that. Paul says we need to decriminalise all drugs, not just cannabis. It's utter madness. So he wants a complete free-for-all.
Yeah, Peter, morning to you. Peter says if alcohol was a new thing now, would that be classed as a Class A drug? It's all down to social acceptance.
OK, and we'd love to hear from you throughout the programme. Keep your thoughts coming in, gbnews@gbnews.uk. We'll see you in a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. Good to have you with us. It is 17 minutes past 9. Here to discuss all of today's top stories is Andrew Pearce, consultant editor at the Daily Mail. Morning to you, Andrew.
Good morning to you both. Yeah, how are you?
Very well, thank you. What about the Conservative Party? Are they OK? We've heard Liz Truss is going on a bit of a charm offensive this week, which is a bit of a departure from sanctioning the most horrible briefings against one of her detractors, Michael Gove, over the weekend, calling him troubled and, what was the other word? Sadistic.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. Look, I haven't covered a Tory party conference like that for years and years. The disunity, we always use the word, don't we, febrile. There was a febrile atmosphere. And, of course, a lot of Tory MPs were coming up and saying, we didn't vote for her. Well, because of the rules, barely a third of Tory MPs voted for her. We're now reading in the paper say she's going on a charm offensive. You normally tend to do a charm offensive as you're getting near the end of your premiership. Dissent breaks out. You don't normally have to do a charm offensive 5 weeks after you started as Prime Minister. She's got herself into a bind too on benefits. Are they going to be uprated in line with inflation? Most certainly, because Cabinet will agree that tomorrow. But she allowed the impression to be given that she wanted to uprate them in line with earnings, which is 5.5%, 6%. Inflation's nearer 10%.
Yeah, so that's the key then, isn't it? Allowing her...
She did.
But is it a U-turn or
It is
not?
really, because I think we were given the distinct impression that was where she was going with this. Now, some people watching this will think, good, because people on benefits, why are they going to have the rate be uprated in line with the rate of inflation? They're not working. People who are working hard only going to get potentially a 6% pay rise. But not everybody on benefits are sponges and scroungers. Most people on benefits need the money. And if you're going to try and cut the top rate of tax of people earning £150,000 or more, can you really then say to people on benefits, you can't be uprated in line with inflation? So they've got themselves into another completely unnecessary bind here.
Will the charm offensive work? I gather she's asked Kwasi Kwarteng if she can swap in with him and go and talk and address the 1922 committee herself. So Graham Brady's been briefing to say that he's not minded to change the leadership election process. We also hear Grant Shapps has got one of his spreadsheets on the go again. I mean, he's got our work cut out.
He must be a whiz at Excel.
He at the Tory conference, he showed me this new phone he's bought, this Samsung thing, which sort of
screen.
opens out like
Eamonn's
that.
got one.
And he said, I am a geek. We know he's a geek. And on there was the spreadsheet showing what Tory MPs were saying about the plan to cut the top rate of tax. And of course, the Prime Minister was made aware of it. That's why the plan was dropped, not because she didn't agree with it anymore. It wasn't going to get through the Commons. And there was the evidence on Grant Shapps' device. But you see, Shapps could have stayed on in the Cabinet. He's one of the more effective communicators. Gove could have stayed on in the Cabinet, but she kicked them all out because she only wanted people in the Cabinet who voted and supported her.
Do you think she's learned her lesson about having that ideology, sticking to it, and the real-world politics?
I think so, because it's a basic mistake, really. So we've seen now today that Greg Hands has been brought into the government. He's not in the Cabinet, but Minister of State to replace Conor Burns, who was fired, rather peremptory in my view, last week. And he was a big supporter of Rishi Sunak. So I think the penny's dropping here, that it's not a cult, the Tory party, it's a parliamentary operation, and you need to bring talents from across the party.
Yeah, because although she has this huge majority, it's a legacy majority, isn't it? And she's got to try and keep guys on her side.
Yeah, talking about Nicola Sturgeon, last day of the SNP.
What a stupid thing to say.
She said, I detest the Tories, although she did later clarify it was about policies, not people.
But she's not withdrawn that phrase, I detest the Tories and all they stand for. Right, so she detests me. I don't blame her for detesting me. I'm not a big fan of hers. But that's not the sort of language you expect of a Prime Minister, a stateswoman. It's dangerous, it's nationalistic, and it's going to provoke hatred and contempt and anger. And she should be trying to cause less grief and aggro about the political process, because people don't think much of politicians anyway. And you get the First Minister saying, I detest the Tories. 700,000 people in Scotland voted Tory the last general election. Well, they'll have noted her words, won't they? And the fact that she's not going to apologise.
She's doing her closing speech today up in Aberdeen, and of course we've got this Supreme Court hearing the next 2 days. Indy Ref 2, here we go again, talking about all of this again. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Look, she told us when we had the last referendum, it was once in a generation, and that was just a few years ago. there's no support in Scotland for a second referendum. If she does hold one, it won't be binding. It will just be advisory. It's a waste of time. But that is the whole point of the SNP, isn't it? Independence. So, and I think she's hoping the court rules it out about a referendum, because then she can just campaign all the way up to the next general election, saying the establishment's trying to stop us having a referendum. Because if there was one, she'd lose it badly. And that's the end.
Although the polling suggests that arguing a general election on a one issue may not be the best way forward at the moment.
Well, she can't argue on her record on the economy or education or the health service because it's hopeless.
Cut price coronation. Are you a fan of a slimmed down 1 hour quick?
No, I'm not actually.
Quick coronation.
I'm not actually. I can see we're in a cost of living crisis. He doesn't want this to turn into a huge expense. But we haven't had a coronation since 1953. It lasted 4 hours. I don't think it needs to be 4 hours. Why not 3 hours? It's a fantastic showcase for the world, isn't it, at the coronation, in the same way the Queen's funeral was. It was done brilliantly, pomp and pageantry at its best. Nobody does it better. The eyes of the world will be on Westminster Abbey and perhaps cut back some of the dignitaries. They're talking about perhaps some of the House of Lords won't wear their ermine. Well, why are they even going to be there? So you could cut it back a bit.
Robes or no robes?
Robes or no robes. Look, I'd go for the whole thing because it's what we do best. And
all 9 yards for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And if I was invited, and I was a member of the House of Lords, but I won't be invited, by the way, yes, I'd be draped in my ermine.
You would,
I would.
I would look at soft power, isn't it? And
is
people
soft
do
power.
want to be associated with it, and you see everybody queuing up to be involved in some way at world leaders.
You know, so that reception in Buckingham Palace the night before the Queen's funeral, I saw that described in American papers all around the world as one of the most important diplomatic receptions in decades, because everybody was there. President of the United States, President of France, Prime Minister of Canada, all to see the new king and to pay their tributes to the Queen.
Yeah. Speaking of a cost of living crisis, which is why he was kind of talking about a cut price coronation, is putting carrots in children's breakfast meals. Is that part of that?
Have you ever heard of anything more ridiculous? I don't have children, but I can just imagine the
they don't
squeals
want to eat
of
carrots
protest.
at supper time. I don't think it'll be any different at breakfast time.
This is a report. What's it in? It's in the Institute of some Health. What they're saying is people only assume you can have vegetables at dinner time. So what they're suggesting is you get vegetables into children's breakfast and you grate carrot on their cornflakes. Good luck
on
with
the
that.
cornflakes.
On the cornflakes.
Really?
I can imagine making
that is a bit weird.
Yeah, a bircher or something that you put in the fridge overnight.
Also in their porridge.
I'm quite up for this.
And it also suggests when you make your children's omelette for breakfast, how many people make omelettes for their children for breakfast? Do you make your
Well, I'm here, so definitely not.
Well, we never had omelettes when we were kids. Too poor. But I mean, I thought...
A one-egg omelette.
Yeah, I thought, who are these middle-class people who write this junk? Well, it's junk, isn't it? Because I thought... And so, yeah, of course, grate some vegetables in an omelette, but that's what you have for your tea. You're allowed to call it tea. Not for breakfast.
Yeah, that's mad.
But you must. I was thinking it was going to be unusual things for breakfast, you know, like pizza or something like that.
Hard-boiled egg or something.
It's saying carrot, spinach on the porridge as well.
Well, surefire way to stop them eating anything.
And what's wrong with a bit of sugar and milk on your porridge? That's what I have on mine. Yeah, I do have some blueberries.
You're such a good Tory. That's what you have to have. No sugar tax for Andrew Pearce.
No, I don't agree with them.
Absolutely. Look, always a pleasure. You started
Very
the
nice
week
to
off on
see
a
you.
good note. Andrew Pearce, thank you so much for joining us.
It is 9:25, which means that's almost it from us. Thank you for watching and listening. And it says on there, thanks to Paul, so you have to say
Thanks, Paul. I'll be back from 6 tomorrow. Up next, Tom Harwood with the briefing. Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking early rain clearing the southeast with sunny spells following scattered showers in the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Well, a dry and locally chilly start to the day with plenty of sunshine, although a little cloud is possible at first in the east. Breezy, especially along northern coasts at first. Cloud and patchy rain will take most of the morning to fully clear, but dry and sunny conditions will follow from the north. Breezy around coastal areas with an isolated shower possible across North Wales, otherwise it will be dry with plenty of sunshine for all. A rather breezy day, especially towards the northwest where the odd isolated shower is possible during the morning, otherwise it will be dry with plenty of prolonged sunny spells for all. It will be a dry day but also rather breezy, especially over the hills and coasts, and there will be some patchy cloud but also plenty of prolonged sunny spells throughout the rest of the day.
Rather windy, especially in the west, where local gales are possible at first. Scattered showers are also likely in the west, drier in the east with sunny spells for all. Windy with coastal gales possible at first. Showers are likely in the north, but drier elsewhere. Some cloud at times, but plenty of sunny spells are expected throughout the day. So showers and winds will ease in the northwest, but elsewhere remaining dry with sunny or clear spells into the evening. And that's how the weather is shaping up for your Monday.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very